Chapter 76. On the first day of busy school, arrived at the auditorium, Lane found Hogwarts breakfast is still so rich. And because of the unusual way of coming to school yesterday, Ron and Harry circled around and asked about the specific situation of yesterday. When Ryan sat in his place, the Weasley twins slapped Ryan's shoulders from behind. Then Fred said, "Thank you, Ryan. Your idea saved our family a lot of money by buying textbooks this time." No need to thank. If you don't have many brothers in your family, I can't think of this idea. By the way, can you tell me what I used to buy from me? Ryan asked. Not for the time being, because this is a trade secret. But if the product is made, we will definitely look for you. After talking about the twins, they went to the other side of the table to eat with Lee Jordan. Ryan shrugged and began to eat the breakfast in front of him. Sure enough, people's meals will increase after exercise. Not to mention Ryan, even Hermione had more breakfast today than usual. When everyone was eating breakfast, a large number of owls flew in the sky. There are always more owls at the beginning of school every year than usual. After all, there are always some raw materials for potions and textbooks that are not available at home and need to be urgently sent to their masters. Some of them will be more exaggerated. For example, Neville's package will be bigger than everyone's. So the memory ball that her grandmother sent him last year is quite suitable for him, although the ball can only remind you that there is something you didn't remember. At this time, Ryan saw a grey shadow falling down. He hurriedly pulled the milk jug back with his left hand, and then reached out his right hand to catch the falling thing. This seems to be Ron's owl. Hermione had just been taken aback by Ryan's movements, and now she took a closer look at what Ryan said. Lee took a closer look, and it was indeed Errol of Ron's family, with a letter in his mouth. He walked to Ron holding the faint owl and handed him the letter, and then said casually, "Your family should really change an owl. This owl is really too old. If it weren't for Lockhart's book, it might be replaced with a new one this year." Ron opened the letter as he spoke. After a glance, he said to Harry and Lane, "The Ministry of Magic hopes that we will not pass on the incident of the wall, so we gave each of us 10 gallons of compensation and let my father pass it on to you. When my mother goes to the post office, I will send you the money by the way. Because Errol is too old, I can't bring 30 gallons. It's okay. Don't worry, you can do it whenever you want," Ryan and Harry said at the same time. "This is also a blessing due to misfortune. At least 10 gallons are a lot of pocket money for me," Ryan said. "My money was confiscated by my mother." Ron looked frustrated after listening to Ryan's account. Really miserable. Both Ryan and Harry read the message from each other's eyes. When the meal was about the same, Professor McGonagall began to distribute the curriculum one by one along the table. The first class was the herbal class, and they would go to the greenhouse with Hufflepuff. Professor Sprout is a professor of herbal medicine at Hogwarts. He is also a fat middle-aged woman with a very good temper. Why I emphasized that my temper was usually very good, because Ryan found that she was standing at the door of the greenhouse with a grumpy face now, covered with dew, and she should have just come out of the greenhouse. Apparently Professor Sprout was angry with Lockhart next to him. The flower peacock was spotless from head to toe. The flowing turquoise robe and the shiny blonde hair were wearing a turquoise top hat with gold trim. After seeing the students, he greeted the students with a spring breeze, while bragging about his level of herbal medicine. But before waiting for him to finish, Professor Sprout interrupted him rarely and shouted to the students, "To the third greenhouse today." Last year everyone was in the first greenhouse. According to rumors from senior students, the plants in the first greenhouse are just something between ordinary plants and magic plants. The plants in the third greenhouse are real magic plants. Of course, there are certain dangers. If they are not handled properly, they may enter the greenhouse vertically and come out horizontally. The door of the greenhouse opened, and a strange smell came from inside. It seemed that fresh manure and floral scent mixed together. Ryan saw many plants in it moving like animals, and the plants had huge flowers. Ryan, they were about to go in. Lockhart called Harry in the past to try to communicate something related to celebrity fame. He is a professor, he should not engage in these things in school. This is the place to learn, Hermione said. After listening to this, Ryan laughed aloud, because he remembered the history of Hermione in the original text. I have to say that over-chasing the stars can really make people crippled. When he saw Hermione staring at him with dissatisfied eyes, he quickly stated his position. It is really inappropriate to put this star style in the school, but this may be because Lockhart just came to the school. I am not very used to this kind of teacher life. I think it should be better after a while. Lane, you can always think of a good place for people, just like defending Snape last year. It's just that I think Snape is at least a potion, and Lockhart is a vain straw bag. No, hearing that he had just bragged about his herbal medicine in front of Professor Sprout, Ron said aside. After entering the classroom, they found that earmuffs were placed on the stool, which should be prepared for the students. Today's class is about changing pots for Mandela. Hermione easily answered the questions raised by Professor Sprout, adding 10 points to Gryffindor. Mandela Grass is the top soul singer in the magic world, fully demonstrating the essence of singing to death. Therefore, labor protection must be done when dealing with him. Obviously, The earmuffs on the stool, a labor insurance supplies. When everyone was wearing earmuffs, when Professor Sprout pulled up the Mandela grass in his hand was like a baby, twisting his body and opening his mouth. Should be shouting. Lean looked at Mandela grass, and suddenly felt that this thing looked a bit like a ginseng doll. It is a pity that Mandela grass has no magical tonic effect and can only be used in many antidote for poisoning. Thinking of attacking poison with poison, Ryan somehow thought of poisonous snake bubble wine, and later thought that maybe Mandela grass bubble wine can promote blood circulation and stasis. Hermione next to him saw Ryan in a daze, so he touched him with his elbow. When Ryan recovered, he discovered that the professor's demonstration had been completed. Fortunately, Ryan's brain collapsed at that time was not too bad, so in the next operation stage, there was no problem. Chapter 77, Busy First Day of School. Thanks to Mad Dave's plant breeding heritage, even if Mandela can sing and dance, maybe he will do something else, but it is still a plant. Ryan grasped the characteristics of Mandela after observing Mandela for a few minutes, then pulled out, changed pots and filled the soil in one go. When he finished, he found that others were still fighting with Mandela. Yes, it was a fight. Ryan saw more than one classmate bitten by Mandela's finger. Lean's neat change of Mandela grass for pots earned Gryffindor another 5 points. After the herbal medicine class, the man took the opportunity to ask Professor Sprout after class a question that he had never thought about in his previous life. That is why so many students in the original book had to wait for the mandrake in the greenhouse mature instead of going outside to buy Mandela grass. Of course, Ryan's question is why he has never seen anyone selling Mandela grass outside. Professor Sprout replied with some pride, at least throughout Europe, only Hogwarts successfully planted Mandela, and wild Mandela was only easy to find when it was mature. However, in the mature state, the Mandela grass will crawl out to the soil to find a suitable place to bloom and fruit. Therefore, in the market, the sale of Mandela grass can only be seen under very occasional circumstances. Ryan thanked Professor's answer and ran back to the castle to bathe and change clothes. He felt that Mandela grass was too much like the legendary ginseng doll. When he planned to use his plant to find Professor Sprout for a Mandela grass to study, in the later metamorphosis class, Ryan and Hermione added 5 points to Gryffindor, and they successfully turned the beetle into a beautiful button. But thinking about how much time she had practiced in the grocery store and Hermione hadn't used her wand for the entire summer vacation, Ryan once again felt the pressure of learning God on him. Because both Chinese and foreign parents will care about their children's studies, but unfortunately Ryan's parents only know that Hermione is a classmate, and it feels bad to lose slightly after every comparison. After lunch, Ryan faced the last class today. Seriously, if every professor had the right to deduct points, he even had the urge to skip classes. That's right. The next lesson is the famous novelist, memory thief, the Merlin Jazz Medal 3, honorary member of the Anti-Black Magic League, and 5 times the Witcher Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. Special class. Only the family can turn the classroom into a fan meeting, not to mention turning the meeting into a disaster afterwards. But no class. No, Ryan can only go to the Dark Magic Defense classroom with several thick and heavy novels with extreme uncomfortable mood. As soon as he entered the classroom, Ryan found that the classroom was more noisy than usual. Many girls had excited expressions on their faces. They chatted about Lockhart with each other. It felt similar to the atmosphere of some star signings. Fortunately, these fans occupied the front of the classroom, so Lane can find a corner behind the classroom to sit down. Then pile up 7 books in front of yourself to block the line of sight in front of you to prepare for fish in class. The class bell rang, and after the whole class was seated, Lockhart walked in from outside the classroom. As soon as he entered, Lockhart cleared his throat and calmed everyone down. Then he reached up and picked up the Walk with a Monster of a little wizard sitting in the front row and held it in his hand, displaying a picture of himself blinking on the cover. He pointed at his picture and blinked. Jidolo Lockhart, the 3rd class medal of the Merlin Jazz, an honorary member of the Anti-Black Magic League, and won the Witcher Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award 5 times. But I don't hang that on my mouth. I don't expel one Lannis ghost by a smile. Don't hang this on your mouth. What are you doing now? Lane silently vomited in the bottom of her heart. After he finished speaking, he waited for a while, looking forward to your support. Sure enough, many little witches laughed. Laughter seemed to give him strength, and he went on with contentment. I saw that you all bought my full set of books. Very good. I think we will take a quiz today. Don't be afraid, just look at how you read, how much you have learned. It was this complete set of books that almost bankrupted Rom's family, and this monopolistic money fraud business was too unethical. Ryan couldn't help but draw Lockhart's fork in his heart. He used to think that this person was quite annoying in the book. Now when he meets a real person, he finds that the real person is more annoying than the book. After 30 minutes, everyone was doing a survey of Lockhart. It's all about some of the colors, like Lockhart's favorite color, Lockhart's birthday, which is similar to the fan test of the fan support club. Is Lockhart really planning to develop his fan support club in school? Ryan felt that the magic world should also prohibit this kind of commercial behavior from entering the school. What's worse, Ryan had to endure Lockhart for 10 whole hours after spending half an hour compiling the 3 large test paper minutes of narcissistic test paper reviews. Hermione scored 5 points for answering all the questions correctly, and Ryan looked at Hermione in the seat beside her in surprise. Hermione covered her mouth with one hand and said to Ryan with her mouth, "I just habitually remember everything in the books I have read." "Ha ha ha, it's very good. Now, it's back to business." He stooped down and picked up a large cage covered with a drape from behind the podium and put it on the table. "Now, be careful. My task is to teach you to resist the most evil things known to the magic world. You will face the most horrible things in this classroom. But remember, as long as I am here, you will be hurt in any way. I only ask you to remain calm." Lane saw the cage immediately packed all his things. He didn't want his things to be messed up by the elves. After a dramatic performance, Lockhart opened the door of the cage of the Cornwall elf. "One thing Lockhart said is right. These little guys are really dangerous. Although they have no magical powers, and they just like to play tricks instead of hurting others, they are not like kind creatures like the Smurfs. They are small in size, mobile and flexible, excellent in physical strength, cunning enough and team spirit. When dozens of elves gather in a small space, even many adult wizards can't handle them." In order to pretend Lockhart actually released them all. Is a chaos and disaster inevitable? No, Ryan doesn't think so. Chapter 78, New World opens. Ryan didn't want to be messed up in the classroom, especially these elves would destroy the students' property. He used his wand to point at the desk and read a metamorphosis, which turned into a fine net. Then he read Waddy Watty to the net. The net covered the cage on the podium like a bullet and wrapped most of the elves together with the cage. The remaining elves of the missing net were easily subdued by the students. Harry even photographed an elf with a book with his agile skill. When all the elves were stuffed back into their cages, Lockhart had some intentions. He praised the classmates briefly, and then added 5 points to Ryan alone. Lane's smile appeared on his face, not because of Lockhart's praise, but because he received a message from the system in his mind. Because he prevented the disaster caused by the elf in class, he obtained 2 deviation points. Lockhart mistakenly thought that the smile on Ryan's face was an admiration for him, so he boasted more vigorously. "When I was traveling in Scotland, I met hundreds of elves, but I subdued them all with a self-made spell." Fortunately, after this farce, class time was running out, and the sound of the bell after class quickly saved everyone's ears. After class, Lane and Hermione went to the library to do their homework as usual. Soon, Ginny also came to the library to study. She first thanked Ryan for sending her notebook and consulted them about Lockhart's class. "I can only say that Lockhart may not be a good teacher. He brought all his star sets to the classroom, which is very inappropriate." Lane whispered his opinion to Ginny. Hermione wanted to say something, but gave up after thinking about it. After dinner, Ryan returned to the dormitory to collect some things, and then entered the bathroom when no one was there. Ryan can be sure that there is basically no surveillance in Hogwarts except the bedroom is the bathroom. After entering a compartment and locking the door, he opened the space door and came to the Wonji grocery store. Because during this time Ryan felt that his previous inheritance was almost absorbed, he decided to take a new world adventure to see if there was anything suitable for him. Looked at the 49-point offset point in his hand. After a while of thinking, he decided to go to a level 5 world adventure. After all, the more powerful it is, the more deviation points you need to master. If you choose a level 6 world, on the one hand, you may not be able to deal with the dangerous situations you encounter. After all, there are 100,000 levels of Zombie Wars, Plants vs. Zombies world, which is a 5th level world. The danger of the 6th level world can be imagined. On the other hand, there may not be enough points left to increase strength. After making a decision, Ryan communicated with Wonji grocery store and paid for the offset points. Later, with a ray of light, Ryan was sent to a new world. Where is this? It looks no different from the normal world. Ryan stood on a dirt road while looking around, silently muttering in his mouth. The dirt road under his feet now appears to have been stepped on by people, and the shoe prints on it indicate that there are people in this world. Both sides of the road are barren mountains and woods. Ryan walked to the roadside to observe carefully and found that the trees on the roadside are some common tree species in southern China. It seems that this world is an oriental world, and I don't know what the specific situation is. Ryan used life magic to perceive the surrounding situation, and found that the biggest feature of this surrounding is that the breath of death exceeds the breath of life. He shaved his feet at the place with the strongest breath of death by the road, and actually kicked out a human tooth. This place does not look very good. I hope to meet a living person. Thinking about it, Ryan decided to look around for clues. After all, according to his own experience before, when he came to those worlds, he often came near the children of luck in this world. Since there is a way under your feet, it is definitely the best solution to go along the road. Ryan took some things from the grocery store, then took off his robe and stuffed them into his school bag with him to dress up as a traveler. As for the reason for taking off the robe, it is because that black robe does not look like a good person in most of the world. Walked along the dirt road for more than 10 minutes, on both sides of the untouched barren mountains and woods. Ryan also determined at this time that the breath of death in this area is not just a little problem, but that the entire region has this problem. Lane silently prayed that he would not come to a certain doomsday world this time, because few living people represented a lot of shrinking harvest. Fortunately, after turning a small mountain bag, pedestrians slowly appeared on the road. Both sides of the road also became rice fields, and some farmers worked in the rice fields. Looking at the clothes of the merchants and farmers in the field, this should be the dress style of the Republic of China period. Ryan started to figure out what kind of world he traversed. This should be the world of a Hong Kong film, but which world still has to find someone to ask. He walked a little bit further and saw a very prosperous small town in front, which should look like a county town. This county is surrounded by a circle of walls. Facing the dirt road is a tower. However, the city walls and towers are dilapidated. In the cracks of the bricks, there are some wild grasses floating in the wind. There are several soldiers standing guard at the gate of the city, but these are the soldiers from the warlords. It's not so much a soldier as a group of rascals. One by one hanging his arms wide open, looking at the things of the common people entering and leaving the city gate. From time to time put an egg and 2 copper plates in his arms. Lane was not afraid of these soldiers because of his magic. He walked into the city with his head high and swaying. Because modern people have superior living conditions, Ryan naturally grows tall and was fair-skinned. In addition to wearing a standard dress, and the pride brought by self-confidence, the guards at the door did not dare to come over and stop. He even nodded to Ryan. "Count your acquaintances." Ryan spit out this sentence from the mouth of the young masters in the TV series. Then he took out several silver coins from his pocket and threw them at the guards. Several guards quickly picked up the silver coin and found that it was quite pure. It's just a little smaller than the normal ocean, and it also has foreign words that it doesn't know. It is estimated that the young master came back from abroad, and the rewards all use foreign money. One guard said that although the foreign money was a bit less, it added up to about 2 or 2. In the early years of the Republic of China, the money was enough for some people to live for a month. For the guards, it was enough for them to have a good meal. Chapter 79, Renjiazhen. Regardless of how the guards divided the money, Ryan observed the city silently after entering the county. This county town is quite bustling. There are many small street vendors selling on the main street. There are dozens of shops lining up along the street. The store is even selling foreign goods such as matches and kerosene. After all, this is just a relatively remote county town, and not many people dress like Ryan. So when he walked on the street, he attracted the attention of many local residents. Ryan could even hear them talking. "Whose young master has never been seen before? Look, isn't it just a fake foreign devil? Look at his energy. But it's really rich. Looking at the fabric of that dress, it is estimated that it takes a few pieces of ocean to buy it." Lane really didn't want to stand on the street to make people look like animals, so after a turn, he walked into the biggest restaurant on the street. The second child of the store very enthusiastically invited Ryan into the store, and Ryan asked the elegant room upstairs to sit. "Because I just had dinner, and now it's not a meal." So he took out 5 or 6 silver coins to put on the table. Then he told Xiao, "Go, let me give the younger a pot of tea, and choose 3 or 4 refreshments. Then talk about the strange things around here. This silver is yours." "Good, master, you are waiting." Xiao happily sang a song, then bowed and retreated. After the second child left, Ryan began to look at the furnishings in this house. The objects inside were antique, the large pieces of furniture were made of solid wood, and the workmanship was also exquisite. It seems that these crafts have not been forgotten in this era. But the elegant room, the largest hotel in the county, still has something to reflect the changes of the times. For example, there is a thermos in the corner, and in a few cases, an old gramophone was placed. Of course, this ancient is about the era of Ryan. This era is a real trendy fashion item. It's just that there should be no electricity in the county, so there are still candlesticks on the cabinets. Of course not kerosene lamps. What a kerosene smell looks like when eating in high-end restaurants. It is estimated that big cities now use electric lamps, but such a small county towns are not yet so trendy. Of course, infrastructure is not enough, and there is no power plant at all is also a very important reason. After about half a quarter of an hour, Xiao came up with a plate. A porcelain pot and a teacup are placed in the center of the plate, and 4 plates are placed around the porcelain pot. This is the latest Luan melon slices this spring, which is the private goods left by the boss, soaked with the best local spring water. These 4 are lotus crisp, osmanthus cake, almond tofu and osmanthus dinsheng cake. "Master, please use it slowly." Lane looked at these things and nodded, and then threw Yink Sike to the shop second. Then he asked, "Is there anything unusual around here?" "Young master, I like to listen to this the most. It's interesting and rewarding because modern people live well. 12-year-old's stature looks like that of 14-5-year-old. The accent of Ryan plus Mandarin is very similar to the accent of Beijing in this era." Dian Xiao mistakenly thought that Ryan was a big man from Beijing, so he stuffed the silver coins in his pocket and nodded and said, "To say rare things, you can ask me if you ask me." When was talking, Xiao reached into his pocket and touched the silver coins. With so many years of experience welcoming them, Primary 2 can tell that these silver coins are real and more pure than the ocean he has seen. Stimulated by money, Xiao Erxing happily told a few rumors that they didn't know the truth, but it was only some whose daughter-in-law who stole a man, and which man was swollen and bruised by his Hedong Lan from the blue building things. Ryan was not interested in this kind of gossip, so I interrupted Xiao and said, I want to know what strange things are around. I don't want to listen to these short stories. After listening to it, Xiao gently slapped his mouth with his hand. Look at my mouth. Young master is a noble person, and naturally does not want to listen to these pickled things. But to say strange things, there are really many around here. Nearby there is a town in Renjia, where there is a legend of Lin Tao who can drop ghosts and catch ghosts. Once rich people have been invited to our county town a few times, so I know him. This should be the world of Mr. Zombie or a series of zombie stories. It's no wonder that on the way to the world feels gloomy. However, in order to confirm, Ryan asked Xiao carefully about the situation of Renjiazhen. It turned out that Renjiazhen was 30 miles away. The real name was Fuzzin. I heard the name and knew that there were many rich people living here. Later, for several consecutive terms until today, the most wealthy people in the town were all Renjia. So after the establishment of the Republic of China, it was renamed Renjiazhen. Speaking of this, what Xiao thought of was saying, Miss Ren's family also seems to have returned from overseas, and she was wearing a dress and riding a horse from the countryside a while ago. It seems to be the world of Mr. Zombie. Ryan took out a few pieces of Psycho and gave it to Xiao. Let him go down to help find a carriage to Renjiazhen and wait downstairs. You reading www.youcanzu.com. Xiao took the money and left with a smile. Ryan slowly finished the refreshment and went downstairs to board the carriage. The carriage went north along the dirt road. Torian's blessing in a dress was unimpeded by several inspections on the road of this era. An hour later, the carriage arrived at Renjiazhen. This is really a prosperous town, and there seem to be tens of thousands of people living here. After getting off the bus, Lane went to the street vendor to ask about Lin Dao's details. The Taoist is indeed a local celebrity, and the first hawker who met with Ryan knew many things about Lin Tao. Under Ryan's package, he made several sugar paintings and distributed them to the children playing on the street. The hawker knew all about Ryan, and he was full of words. For example, everyone called Lin Cheng Jushu. He lives in Yizhuang outside the town. The director has two apprentices. One is the nephew of the owner of the rouge shop in the town, and the other is relatively mature. There is also Jushu, who is a very decent good man, but it is just a bit more stingy. So I wear an old gown all day, even if I eat meat 1 by 2, never more than half a catty. Hong Kong zombie movies. This is also a legend, and this story is the beginning of the legend. Lane muttered silently. Although this is an innumerable story written through the novel, but really experienced it personally, Ryan still felt extremely excited. After all, for an uncle who was born in the 1990s, Uncle Ying's zombie movie is a childhood memory. After asking the hawker about the situation in the town, Lane determined that the plot had not yet begun while eating a sugar painting left over while strolling through the antique streets. After walking around, Ryan walked outside the town, preparing to meet the protagonist of this world, Jushu. Chapter 80, Meet Uncle 9. Yizhuang is near Renjia town. After inquiring about the residents of the town, Lane only walked to the door of Yizhuang in 5 minutes. Stood outside the door, Ryan knocked on the door, and then shouted, "Is this Mr. Lin Tao here? Come here." Ying he heard from the courtyard. The shutter was opened, and a man in a patched, coarse cloth opened the door. The man looked 30 or 40 years old. What are you doing with my master? Because Ryan wore a suit that looked very valuable, the honest writing was a little surprised. Because in his impression, people wearing clothes like Ryan would not come to this place. Wenkai, who was at the door, a baritone rang in the courtyard. "Master, it looks like a young master. Maybe you are lost." At this time, there was a middle-aged man in the yard who was not tall, slightly thin, wearing grey shorts and peddling a pair of old cloth shoes. It's unremarkable at first glance, but if you look closely, you can feel a calm temperament. Although it is not exactly the same as in the movie, Juching's similarity can let Lane determine that this is Jushu. So Ryan made a joke on Jushu as he did on the TV, and then said, "I have seen Sin Chang, and I learned some Western spells from childhood when I was young. Now I have a little gain. So I turned to my hometown." The second is that when I was young, I heard from my elders that there are endless numbers of natives of Tanoan, and I hope I can learn 1 or 2 skills. Because I heard that the governor in your local area is very advanced, I took the liberty to visit. Uncle Zhu bowed with one hand and gave back a half ceremony. He said modestly in his mouth, "Tao and fashion are just the love of the surrounding villagers. They don't dare to be. Please invite them, literary talents, and make tea." Uncle Zhu looks at Ryan's age, but his body is obviously biased towards the right way. At the same time, the skin is tender, with a rich and noble body. Although it is very different from the practitioners of Middle-earth, it will never be an evil way. So I also want to communicate with Ryan, to play the effect of other mountain stones, can attack jade. Although Lin Fengjiao is upright and envious, He is not old-fashioned. Ryan will not be excluded because he is not practicing Middle-earth. As soon as he walked into the courtyard, he saw a handsome white-faced Xisheng walking from behind, looking at the sweat on his body. Probably because he just practiced in the back. Xisheng, a guest is here, quickly put on your clothes. Then Jushu said to Ryan, this is my big disciple Xisheng, just that is my second disciple Wenkai. In the room, the guest and the host were seated. Wenkai came in and offered tea to everyone. Ryan quickly stood up and thanked Wenkai. This made Jushu nod secretly after reading it. It is a good thing for a junior to cherish modesty and benevolence. Then Ryan and Uncle Ji began to exchange things in spiritual practice. The two sides had a very pleasant exchange, especially when Ryan took out the exchange to get the knowledge of the Viking wizard, and the magic of maintaining the balance of life and death caused the resonance of Nine Uncle. Because of the agreement, the time passed quickly, and it was dark. Unconsciously looking at the sky, Ryan and Uncle Ji temporarily ended the conversation. Ryan told Uncle Ji that he might need to harass him for a while, and Uncle Ji said that if Ryan didn't want to let go of it, he could live as long as he wanted. Then Ryan gave Wenkai some yinxi to ask him to buy more food in the town. After all, he had to live for a while, and it was not suitable to eat for nothing. After Uncle Ji resigned, he let Wen accept it. 2 days later, Ryan stayed at Yizhuang and Jushu to practice, so Ryan knew that this world was the end of the age of the last law, and the door of the avenue was closed. However, there is still a way of virtue to practice. If you want to practice in this world, you need to do more good deeds to accumulate merit. Then use virtue to refine the surrounding energy. Otherwise, with this world's bias towards a dark energy environment, it is easy to get into the magic by directly absorbing energy. No wonder the world warlords are fighting and the demon is rampant. It turns out that the whole world is going to the end. In the end, it was washed away by a humanitarian torrent, and the extraordinary power disappeared. At the same time, the era of end of the world law has also caused the overall deterioration of extraordinary powers. For example, Jushu's practice is very partial and requires a lot of foreign objects and ritual spells to cast spells. It's not as easy as Ryan's magic spells. After some exchanges, both parties have gained a lot and their feelings have been further enhanced. Ryan then told Jushu one of the purposes of coming here after dinner. Lindao, when I set off on this trip, I got something evil in Europe. Can you help me see it? Oh? What? Jushu asked curiously. Ryan pulled out an iron box from his pocket. Inside is Voldemort's diary that was taken out of the Wonji grocery store earlier. Uncle Ju saw the iron box taken out of a small pocket, and immediately reminded Ryan, you should be a space implement like Yankun Bag. Now Middle-earth is the end of the French era, so the baby is already very good scarce. Try not to expose this kind of treasure to people in the future. Thank you for reminding me, but I believe Uncle Ju, you are a gentleman. After that, Ryan opened the iron box. Uncle Ju's attention was immediately attracted by the things in the iron box. Ryan saw that Jushu was going to reach out and quickly handed the dragon leather gloves to Jushu. Lindao, this thing is very evil. It is best not to touch it directly. Nine Uncle put on gloves, picked up the diary and turned it over and looked at it again and said to Ryan, I can feel there is an extremely evil and twisted soul inside. Are you going to destroy this kind of thing? It's not destruction. In this way, the teacher of my teacheress school has the ability to destroy it. The problem is that the person who made this thing made several similar things, and this thing was sent to my teacheress door to try to open my teacher. A forgotten seal at the door releases monsters to hurt my brothers and sisters. My master can destroy it, but I can't find out information about the seals and monsters, so even if this thing is destroyed, the danger still exists. So I thought ask if you can find information from it. After a while, Uncle Ju raised his head and said to Ryan, I have a way, I just need some preparation. After finishing talking, Uncle Ju put the diary back into the iron box, and then took out a long list of things with pen and paper, and then said to Ryan, I need to open the altar to do it, so you have to go to town to prepare these things tomorrow. If you move fast, you can open the altar at 3 in the afternoon. Thank you, Lindao. Ryan took the paper in his hands and put it in his arms. After packing things up, the two discussed some questions about spiritual practice before going to bed. Chapter 81, Windfall. Early the next morning, Ryan was taken by Xisheng to the Renjiazhen town to buy the items on the list. Renjiazhen is a big town with many merchants traveling from south to north, so everything that Uncle Ju wants can be bought here. Led by local native Xisheng, Ryan quickly found a suitable store to buy cinnabar, yellow paper, 3 animals, rooster and other things. Because it's not bad money, Ryan bought more of everything, and all them picked good ones. After hiring someone from a town to push the goods in a wheelbarrow, Ryan and Cushing returned to Yizhuang. After checking things, Uncle Ju said to Ryan, there is no need to buy such a good one, it costs nothing. While unloading things from the unicycle, Lane said to Uncle Ji, Lindao, this book is left by a big devil on our side. No one even dares to call him his real name. So I thought of dealing with it. I will try to buy what he left behind. After all, I am well prepared. Besides, I don't lack money. Why don't you spend money to buy peace of mind? Cushing and Wenkai showed a speechless expression beside them. It seems that they did not understand the mentality of the rich. Packed up and picked up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Uncle Zhu wore a feather crown and wore an apricot yellow robe. He held the dust in one hand and the bell in the other and walked to the center of the yard. The yard was hung with a red rope in advance. On the I-9 uncle walked to the square table in front of the formation. The square table was already filled with tribute incense candles, and the plate of Moshan Patriarch was placed in the middle of the table. Uncle Zhu picked up the 3 incense sticks and lit them on the red candle on the table, then worshipped them respectfully for 3 weeks and inserted them in the incense burner in front of the card. Then he turned around and said to Lane, "You grab the red rope left by the circle, and I will start the circle a while later, and transfer all the memories contained in it to you through the red rope. But because of touching this evil creature may have a counterattack, the memory sent there will not have anything related to spiritual practice." Ryan made a reply and said, "Thanks to Chief Lin Dao, I just want to get from his memory what conspiracy he has for my teachers. As for what he practices are evil things. I don't want to touch it." After getting ready, Jushu stepped on Yubu's hand to ring the bell and said something. At this time, Ryan saw all the spells slowly shake with the rhythm of the spell in Jushu's mouth. Suddenly, a black light appeared in the diary and shot towards Jushu, but was blocked by the red light on the magic circle. The two sides stalemate for a few seconds. "Lei good night," Lane heard the Uncle Zhu shouted. "Please Grandpa Master." The black light was quickly pressed back, and then a white mist-like thing flowed down to the lane along the red rope of the magic circle. Ryan closed his eyes and began to receive memories, unaware of the shock in his eyes when Uncle Zhu looked at him. The memory that Ryan accepted was mainly a part of the memory of the year when Voldemort released the basilisk and a very small part of the non-attribute soul fragments. But Voldemort apparently hid many key points when he made the Horcrux. This memory can only know that Hagrid was expelled because of the spider. But Ryan noticed that Voldemort was wearing a ring inlaid with black gemstones, which should be another Horcrux resurrection stone. In addition, there was a big windfall for Ryan because he learned snake language. Obviously, when Nine Uncle asked Grandpa Master to collide with Voldemort's Horcrux, Ryan saw some deeper thing. It's just that this snake language is an acquired version, and it must be practiced to speak well. Not as good as the innate versions of Harry and Voldemort's mastery. Lane accepted the memory and opened her eyes, and found that Jushu was sitting on the chair beside him tiredly. Wenkai and Gushing are serving water to Jushu. After seeing Ryan waking up, Uncle Zhu said, "Little friend, this thing deserves to be a big devil. There are hidden traps in it that almost make me fall. Fortunately, I asked Grandpa Master in time not to let the trap hurt me. Alas, carelessness." Ryan saw that Jushu was tired and was so disappointed, so he took out a batch of newly harvested sunlight crystals from the space bag and handed it to Jushu. "Let you worry about Lin Dodging. Here are some of my medicines, which have life and can you see the power of sunlight." Nine Uncle took a can of the crystallized can and immediately said to Ryan, "This thing is very useful to me. I will close the meeting, don't worry about me." Then I walked into the hall and closed the door. Nearly after dinner in the afternoon, Jushu walked out of the house. After seeing Ryan, I thanked. "There shouldn't be many such treasures now. You can give me such a precious thing." "Thank you very much." "This thing is not so precious, at least on our side," Ryan said. "So can you tell me why you think it is precious?" "Because the scent from the sun to the inside is just enough to neutralize the evil spirit in the environment. I used it to practice one afternoon and broke through a small bottleneck." "You said that this can solve the big era of the end of the law. Why is the thing in question not precious?" After talking, Jushu paused and said, "No wonder the foreigners are so powerful. They certainly have no fear of evil spirits, so naturally they are powerful now." Ryan was a little bit crying and laughing at the conjecture of Jushu, but he was not good at saying anything. At this time, Jushu returned to God and said to Ryan, "I heard you said that you came to Middle-earth to seek the way, right?" "Yeah, it's a pity that I also walked a few places, but every family values their own inheritance very seriously, and I count as nothing." "So are you willing to worship me as a teacher?" Jushu suddenly asked. After listening to this sentence, Ryan was surprised. Although this was also one of his purposes, she still asked Jushu curiously, "Lin Dao, my elders told me before I came, that the middle-aged apostles would have to investigate repeatedly. It's never easy to join a martial art in Middle-earth, not to mention that I have another inheritance. Why are you so easy to accept me as a disciple today?" Uncle Zhu looked a little embarrassed and said, "On the one hand, it's the end of the Dharma era, and demons are messing up the world. I think it's definitely not possible to broom yourself at least as before. On the other hand, when the Patriarch was just possessed, I watched. He has even more merits than my head. It seems that he has saved thousands of talents. This proves that your character is not picky. Besides, the merits of this world are superior, and I hope that through you the merits of his work are full of light." After resolving the doubts in Cakesin, Ryan stated that his disciples did not taboo disciples to worship others as teachers, but only forbidden disciples from learning some evil gates, so he was happy to worship Master Lin as a teacher. Chapter 82, The Plot Begins. Early the next morning, Ryan packed up Lasso and went to town to buy incense sticks. After breakfast, Joshua packed up the ancestral hall and placed the small room of Sanking and Grandpa Master, and then began the ceremony of apprenticeship. After giving incense to the heads of Sanking and the ancestors, Ryan gave 3 heads to Jushu and offered a cup of tea with both hands. Uncle Ju took a sip of tea and said, "From today on, you will be a named disciple of Moshan School." Then he handed over a thick book to Ryan and said, "This is my Moshan Taoist code, which contains the supernatural mind and the spell. You can take it for yourself." Although Moshan does not cultivate his body, he also has a superficial you can avoid the enemy's footwork. "I think you seem to have some kind of foreign practice, so you don't need to guide you anymore. You can practice as written in the book." Ryan hastily turned a few pages and said to Uncle Ju with some doubts, "Master, are you too early to give me such a precious mind directly? Is it a little too early? I didn't come to Middle-earth before. After listening to the elders at home said only after repeated trials will the mind be given." Uncle Ju smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, "The people you have stayed overseas may not have been to Middle-earth for hundreds of years. It was really like that a long time ago. But now that the end of the law has come, it is not that light. The biography is out of date, and when the disciples feel that they are qualified, they will give it to them. These things are both talented and Kusheng." "Thank you, Master, since I have something to give you. Thank you for your trust and tolerance." After finishing, Ryan pulled out the lantern grass, sunshine sunflower, sunshine mushroom from the space bag, which can deal with dark energy. The plants and their breeding manuals were handed over to Jushu. At the same time, he told Jushu the effects of these plants. Uncle Ju took these things with a trembling hand and sighed, "Is this because we have steadfastly been punished by God, but we don't know that there is such a thing in the world? If we send someone to see it elsewhere early, where is my land as for this? Why is this?" Ryan had to comfort Jushu beside him, and Jushu recovered after a while. Then he decided to try to plant these things first, and when he would plant them one day, when he had finished planting, he took them to Moshan to see the master. Perhaps the hope of the Middle Tao Domain lies in them. A few days later, while practicing the Moshan Dodian, Ryan planted these plants together with Master Jushu behind Yizuang. During the planting process, they even found an unexpected joy. Wherever these plants grow for a long time, the evil spirit in the land will gradually dissipate. It is impossible to breed evil things like zombies, skeletons, and even ghosts. Finally 3 days later, Ryan practiced the mind-cleansing method and finally developed a sense of breath. Uncle J is surprised by Ryan's speed. But Ryan knows that because the previous system strengthening is equivalent to cutting hair and washing the marrow, plus a large number of merits and crystals of sunlight can be used, so the speed of practice is relatively fast. This qualification is at best a middle grade. 9 Uncle also murmured to Ryan, if before the end of the Dharma era, the whole spiritual practice would be rushing towards the shanking mentality. However, only the most core disciples of the Moshan school can learn this mentality. Unfortunately, when the end of the age of the Fa, this kind of mental method that requires water grinding to slowly grind is not popular. The most popular nowadays are the quick-moving sidewalks. Even though Joshua himself practiced this mentality, it has only broken through the congenital after so many years. Finally, we must rely on the demon to catch ghosts in Moshan in the past, and watch the feng shui to fix the livelihood such as yin and yang house. Just got here, and a servant at the door of a rich man sent an invitation to invite Uncle Ji to have coffee in the town's cafe tomorrow. Uncle Ji looked at the invitation from the Renjia family in the town and decided to see what was going on. Although Ryan has given a lot of thanks to Shi Shili to let Yizuang temporarily get rid of the property crisis, Renjia is the largest family in the town and it is not easy to refute face. Lane saw this invitation and knew that the plot had begun. Uncle Ji took an invitation and said to Ryan, "Tomorrow, Mr. Ren invited me to drink Western tea, but I have never had this Western tea. You happen to come from there, so you will go with me tomorrow. After a while, you tell me how to drink this Western tea, so as not to show ugliness in front of Master Ren tomorrow." Ryan nodded and said yes. That night, Uncle Shi took his clients to live temporarily in Yizuang. Because Ryan asked Ku Sheng and Wen Kai to practice on the same day, nothing happened for one night. The next day when dawn was about to set off, Uncle Sima knew that Ryan was the new apprentice of Uncle Nine, and gave Ryan a pamphlet related to Corpse Rush to meet his elders. It's just that Uncle Nine warned Ryan that this was a side door, not to indulge, otherwise, it is easy to get into trouble. Early the next morning, Ryan followed Jushu to the town to make an appointment. People in the town met with Jushu and greeted each other enthusiastically. It seems that Jushu's reputation in the town is very good. Arrived at the cafe, Ren has already reserved a seat. Sure enough, Ren wanted to ask Jushu about to move the grave. Jushu repeatedly persuaded Ren that this thing was not as good as a quiet thing. But under Ren's insistence, Jushu Songku decided to help his father move the grave. Soon, Ren Yi's daughter also came, looking prettier than in the movie. However, as a wealthy family who has stayed in the foreign world, the bones revealed a sense of arrogance towards people like Uncle Ju. After seeing this, Ryan talked to Ms. Ren with a standard London sound for a while after seeing European and American news, and finally saved her face. Master Ren also looked surprised, because he couldn't figure out why a foreign student would learn these things from Jushu. After that, I ordered coffee and snacks because Ryan was present. Jushu also avoided some embarrassment. After that, Jushu again persuaded Master Ren to move the grave carefully. Master Ren, helpless, said what Mr. Feng Shui had told him. As a result, Jushu saw the fact that Ren was intimidating and tempting. Seeing this opportunity, Ryan pretended to pray and folded his hands together, attracting the attention of everyone at the table. Then he said to Master Ren, "Can I have a look at your coffee cup for you? Because I have lived in the Western Ocean for a long time and learned a lot of foreigners' spells. May give you a good suggestion." At this time, Miss Renjia also said at the side, "When I was studying abroad, I heard that there are spells in the future that rely on tea dregs and coffee dregs to divination the future." And Uncle Ju also said beside him, "This newly acquired apprentice is decent and stable, so I won't say anything." Hearing that Uncle Ju said to his daughter, Ren reached out and motioned for Ryan to see his coffee cup. "I hope I can listen to Ryan seeing what the future will look like through Western spells, so that he can make further decisions." Chapter 83, Zongzi BBQ. Ryan picked up the coffee cup that Master Ren had finished drinking and twirled the coffee grounds. He said, "Falcon, you will soon meet a mortal enemy. Big Stick. An attack. Skull. Master Ren, Imho, you have a bright future. Little danger." Finally, Ryan gently put the coffee cup on the table and said to Ren, "The last is unknown. It is the worst sign, life and death, in a flash." Master Ren was pale, because he recently found himself upset and his business was getting worse. "So I thought about what Mr. Feng Shui said 20 years ago, and intended to move his father's grave in order to transfer. But these words made him feel something bad after hearing it, so he turned to look at Jushu. After all, relative to Ryan, he still believes in his old neighbor Jushu for decades." Uncle asked Ryan, "Are you sure?" Lin replied, "Our school opens a division of divination. The teacher is a heir to the family of divination, and has made predictions that affect the fate of thousands of people." Uncle Ju could see that every word Ryan said was true, and nodded to Mr. Ren. Ren didn't care about his face and asked, "How to crack this deadly robbery?" Lane shook his head. "I still can't see clearly, but you will have noble help this time. But you can't do it alone, otherwise you will regret it." Master Ren still wanted to ask again, but Jushu persuaded him, "I have already said everything I can tell, and I don't know anything else if I ask him. But since there are nobles to help, then pay attention to it when you move the grave. It's really impossible. Lin will also shoot." After listening to Uncle Ji, Renfar was finally less nervous, and soon he left with his daughter. Uncle Ji quickly prepared to leave because he was not used to drinking Western tea, while Ryan ordered another snack and asked the waiter to pack it and prepare to go back for the two brothers who stayed in Yizhuang. On the way, Jushu asked Ryan with concern whether this chance of divining leaks would do him any harm. Ryan thanked the master for his concern and said that the accuracy of these divination is not very high, and what he sees will be very vague, so there is not much pressure on the fortune teller. Another day or two passed, and when it came to the day of the tomb relocation, Ryan and their mentor and apprentice dressed up neatly and went to the Renjia graveyard. Ryan wore Hogwarts school uniform robe and said to Jushu that he was solemn. In fact, he was clutching his wand under his wide sleeves and was ready to make trouble. After a few greetings, Ryan stood behind Uncle Ju and his two brothers and dressed transparently. He naturally heard Brother Wenkai's classic saying, "Is the French funeral a French funeral?" Later, as in the plot, Jushu explained what the burial of the law was, and several strong laborers were responsible for digging the grave bag. Ryan saw that the coffin was buried vertically. Afterwards, Jushu let the people of Chinese zodiac age to rush back, and 4 laborers stepped forward to open the museum. At this time, crows crowed from around, and a group of crows flew out of the surrounding woods. A thick ominous shrouded everyone. Uncle Ju's face was also very serious. Obviously he felt something was wrong around him, but the burial did not stop. The coffin opened and a black smoke came out. Unfortunately, when Ren and Ren Tinting saw the coffin, they immediately knelt down and wept bitterly. They didn't even see this strange scene. Uncle led Ryan and their 3 apprentices to step forward and found that the deceased's face was black and reflective, and there was no trace of corruption like black iron. Not to mention men who know the situation. Even the townspeople watching around can see that something is wrong. Ryan discovered that no one was paying attention to him, so he pointed the coffin with a wand hidden in his sleeve. Lips wriggled and said a Viking mantra, magic detection. This is a very simple spell. The principle is to use the free energy in the air to test the target and whether there is a magic reaction around the target. However, because the energy of this world is yin and evil, when the curse hits the corpse in the coffin, this yin gas activates the Renjia old man who has been completely zombie. Saw the zombie in the coffin brushed his eyes open, and then his arms stretched out flat. The corpse, help. Seeing the lively people around, there was a mess. Saw that the zombies were about to pounce on Ren's father and daughter. Jushu responded sharply and grabbed the back neck collars of both of them to drag them back to avoid the zombie attack. How can zombies wake up and bite people in this broad daylight? Jushu glanced at the shining sun, and he was puzzled because the magic of Ryan is very small, and Uncle Nine does not understand the spells in the Harry Potter world. It has not been found that Ryan is behind the ghost. Quick, ink fountain! Uncle Ji shouted to the disciples. Ku Sheng quickly pulled the ink line and cooperated with Jushu to force the zombie past. At this time, the zombies obviously did not the blood of their loved ones, so their strength was not strong. A ray of green smoke began to appear under the sunlight, and the black iron-like skin slowly faded and cracked. When the ink fountain line touched the zombie, the touched position quickly burst into flames. Ryan saw the zombie injured and wanted to run, immediately raised his wand and shouted at the zombie, all petrified. The zombie was fixed and poured into the coffin, and quickly burned into a fire column under the double action of ink fountain line and sunlight. Soon, the flame went out. The zombies of Renji's grandfather also turned into a scorched black bone, which seemed to become incompetent, and the invulnerable zombies came out and harmed them. Fortunately, this zombie has not been upgraded to the ultimate version in the movie, otherwise the pure sunlight and ink fountain line will not wipe him out. At this time, the father and daughter of Ren's family only woke up from the startle and saw the cremated bones of Mrs. Ren crying. Renfa was crying with dissatisfaction at this time and said, "My father was most afraid of fire before his death. Why did you use fire to burn it?" Uncle Jiren said that he said a little, and said angrily, "You didn't see the zombie just came out and bite. As far as I know, he will the blood of his dear as soon as he comes out. I should save your life." "You should not say me like that. Not to mention that there are so many people in the town. What if I really want to go to town and bite?" The townsman next to him also echoed, Yeah, Master Ren, you can't kill the whole town so selfishly." Ryan came out to make a round at this time. "Master Ren, you just saw the situation just now. My master really did not make alarmist talks. Besides, normal people have been buried for 20 years, and they are not all turning into a bone. The old man's body is still there. It's not a loss. So, Master, let us mourn and change." Renfa was just excited for a moment, but now he calmed down and remembered the thrill of just now, and he was even afraid. Just as Ryan's words gave him a step, he thanked Jushu for his life-saving grace, and hired someone to sort out the remains in the coffin. Afterwards, people will carry the coffin to Yizuang and wait for Jushu to find a suitable crypt and bury it. Chapter 84, Return. On the way to Yizuang, Uncle Ju said to Ryan, "Lei Yan, is this what you said that Mr. Ren will encounter is unknown?" "It should be," Ryan said. "If you weren't the master today and you took him a hand, he might have died in the hands of zombies. It can be said that you are the nobleman in the prophecy." "Oh, really?" Jushu said, and the smile on his face showed that he was satisfied with Ryan's statement. After returning to Yizuang, the master and apprentice began to practice the daily life of farming. Finally, a week later, the plants that Ryan gave to Jushu were planted by Jushu. So Jushu immediately packed the parcel and prepared to return to Moshan to report the good news. After sending off Uncle Ju, Ryan told the two brothers that he was going to see the elders in the provincial capital and left Yizuang. After turning a few corners to a place where no one noticed, Lane chose to return to Wonji grocery store. Back to the grocery store, Ryan began to count his gains, changed the plot, 20 points offset, obtained a full set of Moshan inheritance. It is divided into 5 parts: mental method, charm, miscellaneous learning, side door, and physical skill. A pile of yellow paper cinnabar and other items previously sold in the town. After the inventory, Ryan was satisfied with the relatively complete set of Oriental practice methods he had harvested this time. Although it is the practice method of the last law world, the upper limit that can be reached is not very high. However, it is also convenient for the orthodox Taoism to be repaired in the future. At the same time, as a foundation method, although this kind of orthodox Taoist mentality is slower to build, it will be more solid in the foundation. In short, Ryan was still very satisfied with this harvest, so he began to receive this harvest, turning them into his own strength. The first thing to instill is the part of miscellaneous science and body surgery. Each took 3 offset points. Because miscellaneous learning is mainly about looking at feng shui and matching with cinnabar and the like, while body surgery is about fighting and footwork, it is naturally cheaper to involve no extraordinary power. Is followed by a spell. Due to the extraordinary strength of the glyph, it needs 15 points to learn. After instilling knowledge, Ryan replaced the peachwood sword with his wand and used his magic to try to draw symbols in the air. It turned out that although the drawing was successful, the power consumed was much higher than what is stated in the book. At the same time, the effect of the spell was only half of the effect described in the book. Unbelief. Ryan took out the brush cinnabar and immobilized the only aura in her body to draw symbols on the yellow paper. After several experiments, Ryan succeeded in drawing a simple corpse symbol. After feeling it for a while, Ryan found that this rune is not much different from the painting of Jushu. After all, this is just a basic rune. It seems that these power systems are complementary to each other, and now only simple spells will be like this, so complicated spells, if forced to use magic power, may cause dangerous backlash. Followed by some side door miscellaneous studies, mainly about some application directions of spiritual power, such as manipulative puppetry, some methods of driving away corpses, etc. Although Ryan thought it was of little use, he just learned these things just in case. Consumes 7 offset points. Finally came to the highlight. Ryan tried to instill aura into the body. hoping to save practice time because he had successfully completed self-study before. This time he only needs to infuse his strength. However, the system tells Ryan that his body can only be infused for 1 year, and requires 20 offset points to infuse. After weighing for half a day, Ryan gritted his teeth and chose to instill strength. Then a beam of light shone on Ryan, making him feel as if the whole person was soaking in the hot spring, not wanting to move lazily. After the beam of light disappeared, Ryan was surprised to find that his practice level was almost the same as Ku Sheng, who had practiced for nearly 10 years. After thinking about it, Ryan only thought that the difficulty of practicing in the end of the French era was great, and the grocery store was calculated according to the practice in the ordinary environment, which is naturally different from what Ryan originally thought. After this series of improvements, Ryan smiled bitterly at the remaining 5 offset points. It's really distressing to spend so much time on the offset point. He can only comfort himself with the fact that his current strength has increased. After several weeks of carrying spiritual power in the body, Ryan stood up and cleaned up, then took out the mirror and looked at it, and chose to return to the real world when there was no floor. Stepped across the space door, and Ryan appeared again in a toilet cubicle. He left because it is after dinner. The students are concentrated in the common room or library, and there are not many people in the bathroom near the classroom. After washing his face at the tap, Lane chose to go back to the common room in the Gryffindor Tower. I have been in the world of Mr. Zombie for almost half a month, but I have only spent hours in this main world. This jet lag gave Ryan an absurd feeling. He just wanted to go back to bed and adjust the jet lag. On this day, Ryan went to bed at about 8 o'clock in the evening, and he got up early to exercise early the next morning. After going out, she was surprised to find that Hermione was reading early in the common room. Sure enough, is this what Zongzi BBQ does? Lane expressed his sincere admiration. After drilling out of the common room, Lane chose to run in the castle. There were very few Hogwarts people at 6:30 in the morning, and Ryan saw only a few students and the rushing principal in pajamas. While there are not many people in the castle now, Ryan went down to the second floor to explore where he might go next. Myrtle's washroom. You are reading www.uukanzu.com. The bathroom is in an unmanned corridor. Although many students going back to the lounge from the auditorium will pass through this corridor, this bathroom looks very shabby and looks like it has not been used for a long time. Just as Ryan wanted to investigate further, a milky figure emerged from the wall to greet Ryan. Good morning, Ryan. It's too early to go to class. What are you doing here? It turned out to be almost headless Nick, Fondo's resident ghost. Early, Jazz. I'm exercising. Lane greeted. Because he is more interested in history on weekdays, he often asks ghosts some questions. After all, these ghosts have experienced those history in person, which is much more intuitive than what is read in the book. Therefore, Ryan himself has a good relationship with several ghosts in the school. When he sees it, he often greets him enthusiastically. Oh, exercise, this is a good thing. Every wizard in my era would exercise, but unfortunately modern wizards seem to have given up this habit, which is regrettable. Nick shook his head regretfully, and accidentally got his head in the end. If it fell, he could only move his head back to its original place. Magic is useful, but it does not mean everything. Nick put his head back and recalled, if I was more attentive when I was exercising, then even if I lost my wand, I might be able to escape from the group of hunters. But Hogwarts really doesn't have many places to exercise. Running in the castle is my only choice. You have been here for a long time. Do you know where there is a place in the castle where physical training can be facilitated? Ryan consulted with Nick. Nick thought for a while and said to Ryan, I think I really knows there is a place to meet your requirements. Chapter 85, Request Room. Is there such a good place? I have lived in school for a year, but I have never found such a place, Ryan said with some doubt. Nick seemed to disbelieve Ryan in his tone, and quickly said, I know this place has been in existence for more than 200 years, and there are countless students in the middle to find this place. Unfortunately, students who knows this place are keeping secrets, so you don't it's normal to know. Where is that place? Ryan asked, and he could already guess where Nick was talking about. That place is called the Bing Room. You go across the giant bar on the 8th floor of Hogwarts Castle and hit the silly Barnabas tapestry. Then concentrate on the venue you need and walk 3 times over the wall. There will be a very smooth door, which can be entered into the request room. However, no one in the school currently knows this place. Recently, some house elves in Hogwarts Castle are using it. Was indeed a room for requests, Lane thought. Now he can finally use the house. After all, once use this house, it will attract unnecessary attention and doubt. As a wizard from a family that has nothing to do with the magic world, in theory, one should not know that there is a room for response. And today's inquiry to Nick finally gave Ryan an excuse to reasonably discover that there is a room to respond. Farewell to Nick, Ryan returns to the dormitory and prepares for class. He had just finished his first class and was rushing to the next classroom. He saw 2 senior students levitating a stretcher with magic to the direction of the school hospital. The diary is in my hand. Why is there something wrong? But why is the regret on someone's face, and happiness on someone's face, but no one is afraid? Ryan was puzzled with a puzzled head. The classroom. When I arrived, I received a shocking news. Lockhart was taken to the hospital because of the injury. After asking the classmates, summing up what he knew, Lane inferred the whole story, because Lane's actions in the classroom yesterday made Lockhart feel that he did not have the ability to highlight himself. So today when he was teaching senior students, he chose a Niven snake to go to class in hopes of calming the senior students. So when he went to the basement to take the Rooney snake in the potion warehouse, he was unfortunately bitten by the Rooney snake. Fortunately, Professor Snape rushed to the rescue in the potion class next door when he heard the movement. Otherwise, this year, Hogwarts is likely to change to a black magic defense teacher. After learning the news, Ryan had to admit that Professor Lockhart was a wolf, and in order to maintain his glorious image, he didn't even have to kill his life. It can be seen from this point that although he may not be a qualified teacher, he is definitely a qualified idol, no worse than idols who burn to 60 degrees Celsius and insist on contacting 26 hours a day. However, when it was the turn of the Black Magic Defense class 2 days later, Lane began to sincerely hope that Professor Lockhart would get better soon, because President Dumbledore actually asked Professor Snape to take the class. The time soon came to Saturday morning. Ryan still got up early, because today is the time to arrange a magical battle with Hermione. After having breakfast together, Ryan took Hermione to the 8th floor giant stick to fight the silly Barnabas tapestry. The monster on the tapestry stopped playing Barnabas and looked at the two curiously. "We want to practice magic. Why should we come here?" "There looks nothing here." A little restlessness. "This is where Gryffindor goes. Nick told me that he shouldn't have lied to me." After Ryan concentrated his thoughts, "I want a place to practice fighting." When he turned around for the third time, Hermione next to him whispered, "Lane, look." Lane looked like Hermione's finger, where there was a door on a bare wall. Ryan grabbed the door handle and opened the door, then greeted Hermione and said, "Come in, it looks safe here." When two people walked in the door, they found that the room was very spacious. The room has no windows and the light source comes from the torches on the wall. There was a row of bookshelves by the wall, and the bookshelves were full of books. There are a lot of instruments at the other end of the room, and Ryan can only recognize a few of them that have appeared in the textbooks of the Black Magic Defense class. A large pile of satin cushions was placed in the center of the room, which should be of the same nature as the cushions in sports venues used to protect the people practicing here. Hermione immediately rushed to the bookshelf, stroking the spine of rows and rows of large thick sheepskin books. Then he turned and said to Ryan, "Look at these books. Common Spells and Solutions, Wisdom of Black Magic, Self-Defense Curse Collection." These books look more than the books in the library. Looking at Hermione, who was eager to try, Ryan quickly interrupted her. "Let us practice first. Anyway, we have time to read these books. They won't run away here." After that, the two practiced the content of the last disarming spell. It seems that Hermione practiced a lot of time in private after going back to www.mplnovel.com and not only practicing magic, but also exercising. So this time her magic attack is more skillful than last time. Lena was slightly underwater, and Hermione finally struck Ryan's wand, which made her look very excited. Ryan shrugged. This is what teaching is like, and it must give learners a sense of accomplishment. Otherwise, long-term failure will seriously hurt one's self-confidence. After the excitement of Hermione passed, the two began to discuss what to learn today. Originally, Hermione planned to further study attack spells, such as coma spells, but the man succeeded in persuading her to learn armor. After finding how to use armor and bodyguards in the Self-Defense Curse collection, Hermione began his regular learning method, endorsement. Ryan looked for a book from the shelf. After a while, Hermione mastered the spell, and the two began fighting. At the same time, give yourself a protective armor, and then fire a disarming spell at the opponent. After practicing for a while, Hermione clearly noticed the gap between the two. The role of the armor is to instantly build an invisible wall around him to block the magic flying to herself, but her armor can only block lane attack, while Ryan can bounce back his attack with armor. In the middle of the rest period of more than an hour of practice, Hermione sat on the mat and said to Ryan, "It seems that in this regard, your talent is better than me. I should only be suitable for dealing with books." "Don't say that. I'm not as powerful as you think. As long as you practice enough, you can do it." Lane encouraged. He didn't say anything in his heart. "That is, if you are fighting a group of 100,000 zombies, it will not take a few days. You will be proficient in all the magic required and how to use these magic to fight properly." Chapter 86, Do a Good Deed. Ryan and Hermione stopped practicing at noon. After confirming that there was no one outside the door through the speculum, the two quickly left the responsive room and returned to the dormitory to prepare for dinner. Here I want to praise the location of the request room, and the entrance to the Gryffindor common room is on the 8th floor. In this way, in the exhausted situation of practice, you can quickly return to your room without having to drag the tired body up the stairs. It took half an hour to clean up, and they went downstairs to the auditorium for lunch. As soon as he and Hermione sat down, they saw a black furry monster walking with a shining light bulb, and a small man beside him kept talking. When they approached Ryan, they discovered that the black monster was Harry, And it was Ron who was glowering in his head, and the one next to him who runs before and after this year is this year's freshman Crivy. What happened? How did this happen? Ryan asked strangely as they sat down. You and Hermione ran to read a book again. It's a pity that you didn't see us today. After hearing Ryan's inquiry, Ron talked excitedly about his heroic performance today. Ryan could easily know what happened today. Harry went to Quidditch training early in the morning, and he encountered the Slytherin team to grab the court, and the two sides clashed. As a result, Malfoy confronted Colin's muddy species, which radically intensified the conflict between the two colleges. Ron successfully hit Malfoy with a slug spell, which triggered a scuffle between the two spells. It wasn't until someone told Professor McGonagall on duty to rush to the court to stop the fight. I tell you, don't look at us like this. Slytherin's side is even worse. Crabbe and Gower have become purple, and their bodies are covered with small tentacles. Malfoy's hair is also dyed colorful. As Ron said excitedly, Hermione asked beside him in a calm tone, how was Professor McGonagall punished this time? The two colleges of Gryffindor and Slytherin deducted 150 points each. Me, Ron, and Malfoy of Slytherin and their Quidditch captain Marcus Flint. The four of us are going to stay together. Don worked for a month. Because his body was full of hair, Harry's voice appeared strange from the hair. Seeing what else Hermione wanted to say, Ron quickly interrupted. After the meal, let's talk about it. I got up early this morning and spent a long time at the Quidditch stadium. After the fight, I was approved by Professor McGonagall. It's been a long time and I am starving now. After the mealtime, the hair on Harry's face caused him to put his hair in his mouth from time to time, and it seemed uncomfortable to eat. Ryan asked curiously, why not go to Madame Pomfrey to heal these? We thought about it, said Ron. But Professor McGonagall found that there was no danger, and she was not allowed to go to the school hospital. She said she hoped that we should remember that the curse should not be used to hurt classmates. Mrs. Frey treats us. She thinks this will help us remember this matter. But seriously, it's all blaming Slytherin for causing trouble first. Right. Hermione thought of something suddenly. What do you mean by the mud type you just said? That's a terrible word, Ron said vaguely with a large sandwich in his mouth. This is what some so-called pureblood thinks are the most insulting people. He refers to wizards whose parents are both moles. That's what pureblood always thinks of their superior bloodlines, such as the Malfoy family. But seriously, today all pureblood basically has a few mole relatives. If the marriage is made within the light, the wizard will have been extinct. As far as I know, there are several pureblood families that have become extinct because of their adherence to blood supremacy. Today you attacked Malfoy. Won't his father come to see you? Ryan asked Ron worriedly. If you look for me, his father can't afford to lose that person. If it's troublesome to find my father, anyway, there are so many things between the two of us. Don't worry about this one. But you are right. I still write to my father in advance to remind. After eating, he went back to the common room. Ryan stopped Harry who wanted to go back to the dormitory to avoid it. I have a spell here, maybe I can solve these hairs on you. But I am not very skilled. You are willing to try a bit? It's okay, just try. These hairs make me sore and itchy. I can't stand it. Harry heard Ryan's words and took Ryan's hand excitedly. Ryan took out his wand and simply pointed at Harry to read the rune that represents the change and growth cycle. This curse is one of the simple achievements that Ryan researched recently when he studied life magic and Runini heritage. As a golden curse shot into Harry's body, the hair on Harry's body began to grow wildly. When these hairs grow to more than 2 meters long, they all fall off. Ryan saw Harry's hair fall and his clothes became fat. www.mplnovel.com asked him to quickly go to the dormitory to change his clothes and clean up. After a few minutes, Harry and Ron walked out together, and the two bald heads radiated each other. Ryan forced to endure without laughing. Can that make our hair grow? Harry asked. I'm afraid not, because I don't have a curse. Ryan shook his head and said, I just used the curse to stimulate the magic on Harry's body and let that magic effect explode all at once. Then the hair on Harry's body it won't grow indefinitely. But this spell can only eliminate the magic effect, and can't be restored to its original state. For example, Ron's hair can't grow it. Seeing that Harry and Ron were a little depressed, Ryan persuaded, at least Harry is eating now and going to the toilet is easy. Besides, if you repeatedly truss your hair with magic, it may be bad for your hair. Not good for the hair? Ron exclaimed. But my father said he used a curse to keep his hair well when he was young. What about Mr. Weasley now? Harry asked curiously. I think Ryan is right. Or don't use magic to truss your hair over and over again. It's better to let it go naturally. Ron seemed to think of something and said firmly. In short, although this matter was not handled perfectly, it was resolved smoothly. Ryan was satisfied that he had done a good thing today. But unfortunately, he did not get an offset point. Ryan thinks this may be because he has already obtained a deviation point because he has changed the world of flying to school. And the things that change afterwards because of that thing change will not get the offset point repeatedly. It seems that if you want to get the offset point, you have to make some big movements. Lion thought in his heart. Chapter 87, Do One Great Thing. When it comes to making big moves, Ryan suddenly thinks that he still holds 17 Voldemort souls in his hands. Since Mr. Nine Uncle asked his grandfather to go to the upper body for a long time, this notebook looks much more honest than in the past. The faint sense of temptation to people before disappeared. Think also, after all, this thing is just a product of Voldemort's teenage, and I still hope that this Horcrux can release the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets to clean up the school. That means that this thing is not about saving yourself, and the above defense is not as strong as the following Horcruxes. Not to mention that Voldemort was shocked at that time, but his age also limited his ability and financial resources. Moreover, this Horcrux directly uses an ordinary notebook as a basis, and its innate deficiency makes it impossible to be as powerful as the following Horcruxes. However, Ryan is ready to find a way to deal with this book. After all, Ryan had already harvested the snake language he thought was most useful to him, and he couldn't look down on the other things in it. In addition to a section of Voldemort's memory that framed others, there should be a part of Voldemort's knowledge of black magic, and even how to make Horcruxes. But on the one hand, if you want to get these, you must communicate with this Horcrux deeply. If you are not good, you can easily plant yourself. On the other hand, for the man who has mastered the grocery store in Wanji, he has enough chances to obtain various strengths and a better way of longevity. The knowledge of Voldemort left in this book is really a bit overwhelming, especially the way to get rid of death with Horcrux. In the Moshan Taoist scriptures obtained by Ryan, the importance of the integrity of the soul is repeatedly emphasized. Even in some cases when the magic weapon needs to be sacrificed, only a small piece of soul that does not damage the foundation is allowed to be separated, and afterwards, some way must be found to complete the soul. As for Voldemort, it must be impossible to cut his soul like a slice of bread. Since this Horcrux is useless to Ryan, it is natural to find a way to deal with it. Of course, throwing it directly on the road for others to pick up is definitely not enough. The original text can only say that luck is good and no one is dead. Ryan doesn't want to bet on this luck. Not to mention that this time Ryan knew the importance of merit in the world of zombie masters. At least Lane felt very smooth when practicing Moshan's mind-cleansing method because of the assistance of merit. So this kind of detrimental to others, detrimental to merit, can't be done for Ryan. Since it can't be littered, the room for processing is very small. Ryan thought about it and came up with a plan that was basically okay. You can either do a good thing or solve the problem. The next day was Sunday. Ryan squatted on the 8th floor corridor with his school bag early in the morning, watching Dumbledore hurried out of the principal's room and ran to the toilet. Seriously, Ryan hasn't figured out why there is no toilet in the principal's room. At least for Dumbledore, a 100-year-old, it is a bit miserable to go out to the toilet every time. Be aware that even in Gryffindor dorms, each dorm has its own private bathroom. After a while, Dumbledore in pajamas was returning to the principal's office, and Ryan hurried forward to stop him. Dumbledore was a little surprised that someone was looking for him at more than 6 in the morning, but he still said in a very gentle tone, "Today is a weekend. I think most students should be sleeping now. But look at how anxious you are now. I want to tell me something important, so come with me." Finally, Professor Dumbledore took Ryan to the door of the headmaster's room guarded by 2 stone beasts, and then entered the headmaster's room along the slowly upward stairs. The principal's office is more refined than shown in the movie. Ryan saw a huge desk and a pile of silver instruments on the table. On the shelf next to it, Dumbledore's Phoenix stood and took a nap. When I heard someone coming in, I just raised my eyelids and glanced back, and then returned to sleep. "Ah, this is Fox. Recently it has not been very good. I think it may be Nirvana." Dumbledore finished speaking sitting behind that huge desk, then waved his hand gently to let an armchair fly to the opposite side of the table. After seeing Ryan sitting in the chair, Dumbledore said, "Although it is the first week of school, you know there are always unexpected things in school. At least when I was the principal, this kind of thing was much more common. I believe that I should be able to solve your current problem. So don't worry, say it slowly. The thing that might make you give up your vacation and come to me early is not trivial, but I think I can solve it." Is indeed the most powerful white wizard. Although the tone of these words is very gentle, the confidence contained in the words reveals a very powerful feeling. This is not the kind of bragging that Lockhart likes. Ryan thinks that if Dumbledore is as old as Voldemort, it is likely that Voldemort will be directly killed by Dumbledore. www.mplnovel.com. Many things are busy every moment, but these things should not affect our enjoyment of life. Then Dumbledore raised his wand and said, "Tea, juice, pumpkin juice, lemonade." Every time a name is reported, a corresponding drink appears on the table. After all, it is normal for the principal to have this authority in the principal's office. "Principal, tea is all right, thank you." Ryan officially asked for a drink. Seriously, every time he saw Dumbledore's blue eyes hidden under the lens, Ryan always felt like he was being seen through. Of course, it has nothing to do with what some of the fans in the past life said about the soul-dispelling curse and the true agent. This is the experience and wisdom accumulated by an old man over 100 years old. "So what difficulties did you encounter, or did you find any problems that need help from my old headmaster?" Dumbledore asked. Ryan took a sip of tea and calmed down completely. He took out an iron box from his school bag, and then brought himself a leather gloves to open the iron box and took out the diary from the box. Dumbledore frowned slightly as he watched Ryan's performance, because Ryan's presence as an enemy meant that he might have found something. Finally, this book was placed in front of Dumbledore from the outside. It was just an ordinary notebook, and even looked a bit shabby and discordant in this gorgeous principal's room. Moreover, the simple appearance of this book also illustrates its universality. The same book in Hogwarts has no 180. But Principal Dumbledore suddenly became alert from the original relaxed state, and even pulled out the famous old one from his clothes. Chapter 88. Sometimes it's a good idea to sue parents. Voldemort's Horcrux notes are not eye-catching. Of course, this is also a way to protect Horcrux. The effect is no worse than hiding it in a cave or protecting it with powerful magic. If only this book enters Hogwarts. Even if Dumbledore has strong principal authority in Hogwarts, he can do nothing about this book. It's just that when this book was placed in front of Dumbledore, all kinds of concealment methods failed. After all, even Ryan, who has been in contact with magic for less than 2 years, can feel that this book has an uncomfortable atmosphere. How could Dumbledore, who has fought Voldemort for half his life, not feel it? I saw Dumbledore waving his wand, and a silver strap was released from the head of the wand to wrap the notebook firmly. The phoenix next to him, who seemed to be in poor spirits, also stood up, staring at the notebook. "Boy, come after me," Dumbledore said while holding his wand. "This thing may be more dangerous than I thought. I think you need to stay away from him." Although Ryan knew that this notebook had not absorbed much energy since it was made. He had a wave with Jushu before, and now there should not be much active attack power. But because these things are not easy to explain, they can only hide behind Dumbledore. After all, today is to sue the parents. After confirming that Ryan had been hiding, Dumbledore turned the strap wrapped around the notebook into a silver translucent protective cover, then carefully commanded a silver instrument on the table and opened the notebook. When he saw the name on the title page, Ryan clearly saw Dumbledore's back paws. Of course, this is inevitable. Although Voldemort's original name was hardly known because of his efforts to erase the past, as a teacher with Voldemort for 7 years and an enemy of Voldemort's life, the moment he saw the name, he knew who this thing belongs to. After seeing Voldemort in the original text, how could Dumbledore, who insisted on calling Voldemort with Tom, not know the original name of Voldemort? Of course, because Dumbledore had fought Voldemort for half his life. Dumbledore, who knew exactly who Voldemort was, naturally did not dare to underestimate what he left behind. Turn it over and found that there is nothing in the book. Dumbledore began to wave his wand drastically, and some spells were spoken in his mouth. Know that for wizards of this level of Dumbledore, most spells can be silent. When the original text was fighting Voldemort in the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore could even release magic while arguing with Voldemort. At this time, Dumbledore actually pronounced the sound of the spell, which showed that he was afraid of such things. With the sound of Dumbledore's mantra, flame-burning Niven runes flew out from the head of Professor Dumbledore's wand, and then went into the notebook one by one. Although he acquired a full set of rune knowledge during his trip to Iceland, he didn't know anything about the magic Dumbledore is now releasing. This is just like some papers, you can know every word in it, but don't know what this paper is talking about. As the characters continued to enter, the notebook began to emit black smoke, and finally a fuzzy face composed of smoke that could barely see the facial features was displayed above the notebook. After the face was formed, the burning rune characters were transformed into a fiery iron chain, which bound this strange face. The strange face made of smoke rushed left and right in the air and tried to struggle away. Although Voldemort's power is probably not inferior to Dumbledore, he may even win slightly. But after all, the diary is only 1/7 of Voldemort, and it is still the state of Voldemort when he was a teenager. Obviously not Dumbledore's opponent. Lane saw that the strange face struggled to get smaller and smaller, while the burning chain became tighter and tighter, and finally the strange face finally stopped moving. But Ryan saw ahead Dumbledore's face more dignified. Is there trouble? As soon as Ryan thought of it, he heard a scream from the diary. The whole strange face diffused into the mist and penetrated through the flame chain, and then turned into a cone of dark mist and flew towards Dumbledore's face. Ryan was forced to cover her ears and squatted down because of the cry. This sound is not just pure sound, it contains an attack against the soul. Although he didn't know what the cone was, he could guess with his toes that it was not good. Dumbledore quickly summoned a flame shield to stand in front of him, and the cone of mist hit the shield and was quickly consumed by the shield's flame. Lane saw that cone quickly became shorter. Due to the excessive energy consumed by Voldemort's previous diary, this cone appears to have insufficient stamina. In less than a minute, this cone was wiped out by Professor Dumbledore's flame shield. Saw the cone disappear, and Ryan took a breath. The diary on the table suddenly made a strange noise. Ryan saw the diary dropped on the table from midair, and then black ink kept coming out after the ink flowed on the table. A sudden flame burst into flames. It's as if it's not ink but gasoline. The flame burned into the diary along the ink, and the diary was also lit by the flame. The cover and the pages burned quickly, as if they had been soaked in fuel before. Finally, The diary was burned into a pile of grey-black ashes. Dumbledore waved his wand to make the ashes disappear, and then signaled Ryan to be fine. When Ryan stood at the table, Dumbledore asked tiredly where he got the thing. Ryan concealed everything related to the grocery store in Wanji and foreseeing the plot in advance. Tell Dumbledore that this is the reply I got from Ginny. But I was very scared when I found that this notebook would actually answer. When after a series of fires and flooding, it was found that the notebook could not be destroyed, only the principal's help could be sought. Of course, Ryan also mentioned the movement of Lucius Malfoy to put something in Ginny's crucible before, saying that he had been with the Weasley family for a year. Do not believe that the Weasley family will have this evil thing. This is probably the malpractice of the Malfoy family. After listening to Ryan's narration, Dumbledore said, "This is a very dangerous thing. Your choice is correct, so I'll add 50 points to Gryffindor. But boy, I hope you don't take what you see say something, because the evil hidden inside is not something that students of your age should participate in. I don't want this to cause panic among students. I will keep the secret, Principal Dumbledore." After finishing, Ryan went down the spiral staircase of the principal's room. When his eyes were flush with the floor, he saw Dumbledore leaning on the chair, watching the beach ashes seemed to be thinking about something. Chapter 89, Emerald Dream. After going out of the headmaster's room, Ryan received a system reminder, a dramatic change in the plot and a 15-point offset. Sure enough, it will get a little more offset points in the main world. Ryan feels very happy, because the offset points at the end have finally recovered a bit. However, it is still a little unsettling to have a basilisk hidden in the back room. Ryan decided to kill the basilisk for everyone's safety and offset points. Originally had no such plan, but after going to the world of Mr. Zombie to obtain the Moshantaoist scripture, Ryan found that he had a way to solve this problem, that is the circle. As long as the magic circle is arranged in advance, you can pry up the great energy with very little force. The world of Mr. Zombie is an end-of-law world and lacks energy-rich items, so the magic circle gradually disappears from its usual use. But these things are still recorded in the Moshantaoist scripture. After reading through, Ryan found that some magic circles can be used to deal with the snake in the secret room. But the question now is, where do the raw materials for the formation of the circle come from? If you want to buy it, Gurren is definitely not enough. Not to mention that purchasing so many things in one go is suspicious. Finally thinking about it, he could only do it himself, and he had enough food and clothing, so Ryan put his eyes on the Forbidden Forest. If you want to draw a matrix, the better the material, the better the effect of the resulting matrix. But the animals in the Forbidden Forest cannot go to mass killing, especially for things like unicorns. A dead one will be recruited to search the whole school. Not to mention that Ryan now chooses the path of life balance. Such wanton killing does not meet the requirements of spiritual practice. Took Ryan for granted and set his target on the 8-eyed giant spider. This kind of thing is a perfect prey, with a large number and fast reproduction characteristics. Killing some will not be found. Not to mention that they belong to evil unnatural creatures. 8-eyed giant spiders are all unnatural creatures bred by wizards like the basilisk. It caused biological invasion in the Forbidden Forest and destroyed the balance of the Forbidden Forest itself. Another key point is that Ryan's life magic can happen to cause great damage to unnatural creatures such as the 8-eyed giant spider. Hunting is more convenient. But if you want to go hunting, Ryan still needs to make some preparations in advance. After a busy day on the weekend, after a curfew on Monday night, Lane sneaked out of the castle and walked towards the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest at night was still so dark. Ryan summoned a lantern grass from the grocery store to take care of herself. Just less than 10 minutes after walking along the forest path, there was a sound of trees on the side of the road, and then a big animal sprang out of the woods. Lane was about to pull out his wand, but found that the creature in front of him looked familiar. After carefully watching for a second or two, Ryan exhaled and lowered his wand and said, "Good night, Betty. You suddenly got out and almost scared me." It turned out that Ryan's old acquaintance got out of the roadside, Betty the horseman he knew when he rescued the unicorn in the forest last year. Betty looked at Ryan for a while and suddenly said, "Have you been to the Temple of Karen on Crete this summer?" "No. The ring you gave me is still on my body." Ryan pulled out a chain from his chest, and the ring was tied under the chain. "Hey, that's weird," Betty said with her front hooves digging the ground twice. "Then where did you learn how to enter the Emerald Dream?" "The Emerald Dream? What is that?" Ryan said curiously. Betty thought for a while and said, "Take my hand and don't refuse my inner invitation. I think you will know it when you enter the Emerald Dream." Right, knowing that Betty would not hurt herself, immediately reached out. Sure enough, just holding Betty's hand, Ryan felt that someone had invited himself at the spiritual level. He quickly agreed to the invitation. As soon as he chose to agree in his heart, Ryan found that his consciousness had been drawn to a world full of natural power and aura. Ryan could guarantee that he had never been in this world, but felt a trace of familiarity. Ryan finally remembered that it was very similar to the dream world he encountered at the Icelandic altar. "It's just that compared to the dream world I encountered, the world is much larger and full of life. Not as lifeless as when I met that world." Ryan checked himself again, and found that this time his soul was like a little boy of 11 or 2 years old, not the appearance of the last youth. He thinks it may be because he practiced Moshan Taoism to strengthen the soul, so that his soul no longer unconsciously releases information. At this time he saw the light spots around him gather together and finally became Betty. I haven't been to the Emerald Dream, but I've been to a similar one. It's just that the world is much smaller than this world, and it's much more dead, Ryan said to Betty, who was forming around him. Your wizard sometimes cuts off a piece of Emerald Dream as your own private site. You may be one of the places you go to, but be aware that once a piece of Emerald Dream breaks away from the subject, all the vitality will soon be lost. You reading www.yuukanzu.com. The world that was taken down is also dead. At the same time, this kind of action is also harmful to the Emerald Dream, so Ryan, you didn't want to learn those bad examples. After admonishing Ryan, Betty went on to say, the last time I saw you help the unicorn, I thought you were qualified to enter the Emerald Dream. That ring is for you to learn how to enter the Emerald Dream with my teacher. I didn't expect you to get the method from other places. Can you show me your method now? No problem. Ryan finished using his own method to exit the Emerald Dream and re-entered. As soon as he entered, he saw Betty frowning and said, the method you learned is completely wizard's. It actually forcibly tears a gap in. This method actually hurts your soul and Emerald Dream. Then Betty's eyebrows were loosened again, and she pointed to the green dots around Ryan and said, but since the Emerald Dream has recognized you, you have passed the most difficult point of entering the Emerald Dream. So you don't need it now. Go to the Koran temple to learn how to communicate the Emerald Dream, and I can teach you the way to truly enter this world. After Betty taught Ryan how to enter the Emerald Dream correctly, after learning, Ryan discovered that the way Betty taught was to feel the flow of nature, communicate with nature, and finally enter. This method is much more subtle and more complicated than the method I learned from the memory of the Viking wizard. However, the speed and cost of entry are much better than the wizard's method, and Ryan can feel that this is the real method. The Viking wizard's method is closer to a speculative trick. In the practice, Ryan couldn't help but sigh from the bottom of his heart that this time he came to the Forbidden Forest was really rewarding. I hope it will be like this every time. Chapter 90, Forbidden Forest Harvest. Between the practice, Ryan asked Betty why he should teach him these things. This should not blame Ryan for being suspicious. After seeing the general blockade of knowledge in the wizarding world, Ryan simply did not believe in free lunch. After hearing Ryan's question, Betty said solemnly, because we need more comrades in arms. Follow me to see, you know why. After speaking, Betty took Ryan to the ground of a giant tree and waved her hand. The giant tree stretched out a branch to form a circular platform. Two people walked onto the platform, and the platform slowly rose to the top of the tree. After reaching the top of the tree, Betty pointed in a direction and said, since this is called the Emerald Dream, there are bad nightmares. And our horse tribe lives in the Forbidden Forest. There is an important task to eliminate the nightmare. Lean looked at the place Betty pointed to and found that the woods in that place were very different from other places. The woods elsewhere are green and full of life. The wood is dark and dead. That's what? Ryan asked Betty, pointing to the woodland that was different. This story needs to start from the beginning, from our horse society. Betty began to tell the story of the Forest of Death. We horsemen are the only sapient creatures in this forbidden forest. Since ancient times, in which forest we live in, we must maintain the natural balance of this forest. The male horsemen in the tribe are often responsible for hunting, collection or outing activities. You humans can usually only see them. But in fact, horses are matrilineal society. Female horses generally do not leave the village. They are responsible for the safety and health of horses. At the same time, because male horses sometimes have some unreliable behaviors, so the leader of the tribe is a woman. The most important thing is that unlike male horsemen who are good at divination and fighting, women are good at communicating with nature, and they can master natural magic and communicate jade dreams more proficiently than male horsemen. Saw Lane's eyes full of doubts. Betty stopped empathetically and asked, do you have any understanding of the question, little pony? It may be a little presumptuous, but the textbook I learned at most said that your horsemen are good at healing magic, archery, astronomy and divination. Never said you are good at other things. Hee. Betty flicked her tail in disdain. Most wizards look at other creatures like blind people. They never want to explore the truth. As far as I know, there are still in your Ministry of Magic a funny horseman contacting the office. But since its establishment, no horseman has ever been there. After taunting the stupid Ministry of Magic, Betty went on to say, we had lived quietly in this forest for centuries without any major problems, but there was a major event nearly 40 years ago. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? I only know that this period of time is also a dark period for our human wizards. Does it matter? Ryan asked curiously. It is likely that there is a dark creature that is causing trouble, the eight-eyed giant spider. They are breeding here quickly. You know, they have no natural enemies in this forest, which causes their number to begin to grow geometrically. Then came the devastating destruction of the local ecological structure. Speaking of which, Betty began to unconsciously plan the ground, and she seemed very angry. The earliest traces of the eight-eyed giant spider were discovered by our fathers, but there was only one at the time, so everyone didn't take it seriously. But then I don't know why there was another one. and it just matched the original one. We at the time of discovery, they were too many to be eliminated at all. Betty said, more and more angry, but when she realized that Ryan was by her side, she slowly calmed her temper and said, you know, even if the horsemen in the Hogwarts Forbidden Forest are the largest group in Britain. However, we only have more than 60 people. We can't cope with it when facing hundreds of huge spiders. So we can only choose to limit the spider's range of activity and shoot all spiders that are out of range. But even so, the scope circle is getting bigger and bigger. At the same time, the dark breath of them and the destructive hunting killed that piece of nature and projected into the Emerald Dream, which is the deadwood you saw. Why don't you tell Principal Dumbledore? I think Mr. Principal should be able to solve this problem, Ryan said, somewhat puzzled. This is a matter of natural balance. It is a matter of us horsemen or people like you who are recognized by the Emerald Dream. We should not bother other wizards to intervene. Not to mention the agreement we signed with the wizards. The castle and the venue belong to schools. The Forbidden Forest belongs to us. Neither side should intervene in what is happening in the other's field. Okay, this kind of political issue is really not good for continuing discussions. But hearing Betty said that it was the eight-eyed giant spider that caused trouble in the Forbidden Forest, Ryan suddenly felt that today was his lucky day. He quickly told Betty, I'm going to make some magic props now, but the materials are not handy. So I think about it, and only the eight-eyed giant spider in the Forbidden Forest can provide materials. What I thought at the time was that only they were not native creatures. Killing them will not disrupt the local balance. Oh, really? As far as I know, you humans tend to have the most powerful motivation driven by interests. So you mean, you will join the eight-eyed giant that destroys the ecological balance of the forest? The spider's war is coming, isn't it? Betty said, looking a little happy. Yes, Mom. Ryan nodded to confirm this, after which Betty said, but you as a second-year little wizard, I'm curious what the bottom card you have to be sure to kill those nasty the eight-eyed giant spider. After all, I also know what level your human wizards were at your age. I don't think that the average level can be of any use in this conflict. Ryan thought for a while and decided to show some cards to ensure cooperation. Last time I saw that I could summon some magical plants. In fact, I can summon far more than you saw last time. Give me some time, I can even arrange an army or plants, except that they cannot move. No big problem. Betty heard this and nodded. When we first met, your plants gave me a very dangerous feeling. I believe they should have combat power. Seeing Ryan's face a little hesitant, Betty said, I know that your ability may cause others to be jealous. But inside the Forbidden Forest, whether it is our horsemen or the unicorns we find this time, it is different from humans. We will definitely not spy on all things of our allies, nor will we be jealous because of the strength of our allies. We can swear in the name of nature that no matter what we see, we will not reveal it to you, nor will we spy on you. Betty's words fell. Ryan felt that the oath had a close connection with the Emerald Dream, and he could feel that if he violated the oath, he would be repulsed by nature. Lane feels embarrassed. Madame, Betty is very free and easy, as our first human ally in these 50 years, only this way can reassure everyone. Besides, is it all right as long as you don't break the oath? Lane was very touched. He felt that the biggest gain in the forest this time was the friendship of a horse friend. Chapter 91, Preparation before the War. After leaving the Emerald Dream and returning to reality, Ryan opened his pocket watch and discovered that although he had been in the Emerald Dream for almost an hour, less than 10 minutes passed in reality. Although it was still early, Ryan felt that he had acquired too much tonight, so he and Betty said goodbye to go back to the castle to sleep because he has to ponder his thoughts. Betty told Ryan that the Horde recently planned to clean up these eight-eyed giant spiders again. She hoped that Ryan could enter the Emerald Dream once a night, so that she could leave Ryan a message. In fact, after knowing the correct way to enter the Emerald Dream, Ryan planned to enter once a day. On the one hand, the environment of the Emerald Dream can soothe the nerves of people. On the other hand, time can be saved in the Emerald Dream. He decided to use this time every day to study the magic he mastered. But what makes Ryan uncomfortable is that with his current strength, the time spent in the Emerald Dream every day cannot be more than 2 hours according to the time in the dream, otherwise it will slowly be assimilated naturally. Of course, Betty was also surprised when she learned of this time limit, because in her impression, the average novice can hold up for half an hour at most. Ryan suspects that this is because his soul has been tempered by the passing of planes, and the mastery of the pure mind on Moshan is now more concerned with the exercise of the soul than the magic in the Harry Potter world. After bidding farewell to Betty, Lane slipped back to the dormitory smoothly. A few days after, Ryan went to school to write his homework normally, and at night he worked as a homework support group in the common room. It is worth mentioning that when Ginny and Colin learned that Harry Potter was also in this group, they strongly requested to join this group. Ryan had to make 3 chapters with them so that they would not harass others during the discussion. This kind of persuasion from the seniors is very effective. Even fanatics like Colin put cameras in their dorms when participating in study groups. Because Ryan had threatened him if he dared to harass others in this place, he would be expelled from the group directly. Unlike last year, this year the group has freshmen, so every second-year class not only has to discuss their homework, but also needs to tutor the freshmen. Of course, This is not mandatory, but when there is time, many second-year students are still willing to tutor newcomers, and the most active one is Hermione, because she feels that each tutoring freshman will help her review the previous content. After learning this reason, Ryan finally came to the conclusion that it is terrible to learn God. He is now very eager to come to a guest who can improve his learning ability. He found that even if he practiced Moshine's mind-cleansing method, his memory, analytical ability, and concentration were improved. But it is still not as good as Hermione. In addition, Ryan returned to the dormitory every night earlier than before, and went to the Emerald Dream to practice under the pretext of sleeping. On Thursday, when he first entered the Emerald Dream, he found a green light flying towards him. Reaching for the green light, there was a letter in the green light, which was sent by Betty. She informed Ryan that this battle will break out on Saturday, hoping that Ryan can prepare in advance. The reason why he dared to directly catch this green light is because the place where Ryan is now is protected by special magic, and there is no need to worry about malicious things approaching. When entering the Emerald Dream from Hogwarts for the first time, Ryan was surprised to find that he was standing on a tall tower, which was still enveloped in a purple protective cover. He found the nameplate on the tower. The general idea is that if Hogwarts students can enter the Emerald Dream, then the tower will become their refuge in the Emerald Dream. What surprised Ryan the most was the name of the Big Four at Hogwarts at the bottom of the inscription. Is worthy of being the founder of Hogwarts School. It is so powerful that it can not only imprint footprints in all planes, but also create a good development space for future generations. But after searching the entire tower, Ryan accidentally found some records on a stone at the bottom of the tower. Every wizard who can get here will record their name and the time they first arrived here. Most of the names are pseudonyms, but some of the real names still make Ryan a bit tight. For example, he found the name of Archmage Merlin in it. In addition, the conclusion can be drawn based on the time left above. From the time of the Big Four, there are fewer and fewer Hogwarts wizards who can enter the Emerald Dream. From 2 times a year at most, there is no one in the next few years. Ryan saw the person in front of him stay in 1861. Can only say that with the development of human civilization, the ability to transform nature is getting stronger and stronger. Among the wizards, there are fewer and fewer wizards who can understand the way of harmony with nature, and master the ability to access the Emerald Dream. I really don't know if this is good or bad for human wizards. After entering the Emerald Dream several times, Lane discovered that he had always appeared from this tower. When he began to explore the surroundings, the purple barrier around him did not hinder his activities. It seems that as long as it is a student recognized by this school, it will not be affected by this barrier. In the Emerald Dream, besides practicing, Ryan spent the rest of his time planning battles with the horses. Thanks to the Emerald Dream, they can communicate with each other without the knowledge of outsiders. After making some changes to the horseman's plan, Ryan grabbed a leaf from the air and left a line of writing on top of it after waving his finger. Then he snapped his fingers, and the leaves folded into a paper plane, flying away like a forbidden forest. This is also the first nature-related spell that Lane learned, and can communicate with people in the Emerald Dream at close range. In the previous communication, Betty deliberately or unintentionally taught Ryan some natural magic. This magic was taught to Ryan on the first day of communication. Lane found that natural magic and black magic have something in common in learning, that is, they need inner power and will subtly affect users during use. Ryan felt that Betty taught himself natural magic. Maybe it was a way for the horses to want to draw him to his own camp, but Ryan did not hate this either. Especially Betty believed that the actions of intelligent creatures are also part of the natural cycle and do not exclude artificial objects. Unlike many men and horses, they are not extremes, and they even have nothing but bows and arrows. Ryan felt that at least the faction like Betty was acceptable. After dealing with these things, Lane spent other time learning magic. After all, it's time to fight again on Saturday, and it's a good idea to grind the gun. Chapter 92, People Gathering. It was Saturday, and Ryan practiced a morning obstacle spell with Hermione in the morning. After lunch, he made an excuse to slip to the Forbidden Forest. Just walked along the path for less than 5 minutes, Lane saw a figure of a horse standing there. But it can be found that this is not Betty he knew, but a male horseman who has never seen him. This male horseman looks bigger than Betty's, and the horse's body is greeny yellow. He had pale blonde hair on his head, and his eyes were sky blue just like President Dumbledore. It looks much younger than Betty. It should be a young man. Are you sent by Aunt Betty to pick me up? Lane asked the horseman. Yes, you are Ryan. My name is Fearns, and I am very happy to meet you. The horseman bent down and reached out while introducing himself. This should be the horseman who came to the school as a teacher of divination in the 5th grade, and it should also be the closest person among the horsemen. No wonder Betty will find him to pick him up. While thinking about it, Ryan reached out and shook hands with Fearns. Then the two followed a branch of the path to a place that Ryan had not visited before, but according to the direction, this was in the direction of the dead jungle that I saw in the Emerald Dream. Sure enough, Fearns next explained, we have to gather near the valley where the 8-eyed giant spider entangles, so that we can reach the battlefield directly after the gathering. The shamans in the village have set up a natural barrier, Don't worry about the spiders. Discover in advance. Along the way, Ferenc has been curious about Ryan's life in Hogwarts Castle. It seems that he is a little curious about the human society. At the same time, he also told Ryan that this time there was also a dispute in the Horde tribe because of Ryan's participation in the war. The conservatives led by Ronan firmly believe that this is only a matter of intelligent creatures in the Forbidden Forest, and no humans in the castle are needed to help. But Betty argued that this human being was recognized by the Emerald Dream. Then we horsemen, as children of nature, should not refuse to eliminate darkness together with such a person who is naturally favored. You don't know, I immediately support half of you to invite you to participate in this hunt, and half object to your participation in this matter related to the forest. Ferenc said to Ryan who followed. Then I'm here. It means that you agree with Aunt Betty's proposal. How does Aunt Betty convince others? Ryan asked, somewhat puzzled. Persuasion? Ronan and they are as stubborn as a donkey. How could they persuade them? But in the end the unicorns don't know where you are from. At yesterday's meeting, they thought you should be allowed to participate in the action. Ronan, they saw allied stations on Betty's side. You can only agree to your participation. It seems that the last time I kindly rescued the injured unicorn actually let the unicorns remember me. Sure enough, good people have good rewards. Lane thought silently in his heart. Speaking here again, Ferenc said solemnly, although we are very upright, once we agree to something, we will never secretly commit mischief, but Ronan and his group will never give you a good look. Hope don't be angry with this. Relax, I will definitely not. Ryan said. After all, it is absolutely undesirable for one's internal infighting when the enemy is present. You just think about it this way, and I guarantee that they will say a few words at the most. They will never make any small movements during real battles. Ferenc seemed to relax a lot after listening to Ryan's answer. After walking for more than half an hour, Ryan and Ferenc finally reached their destination, a clearing in the forest with a few large stones. After Ferenc notified that he had arrived, Ryan immediately stopped and began to pat his leg, then picked a stone and sat up. I have to say that the road in this jungle is not easy. In addition, Ferenc's 4 horse legs are faster than Ryan even walking slowly, which keeps Ryan in the state of brisk walking and trotting. Even walking for only half an hour is tiring and exhausting. Fortunately, the strengthening of the assassin and the practice of Moshan's mentality have strengthened Ryan's physique, which allowed Ryan to follow Ferenc's ugliness. At this time, Ferenc also came over, looked down at Ryan and said, I think you can't do well, and I'm going to wait for you when you can't move. After a few casual chats, the one in front opened from the bush, revealing a path. Following the path, Lane and Ferenc quickly came to a small valley, where more than 40 horsemen and a dozen unicorns were scattered, and there was a grey giant wolf and horseman. Stand together. It seems that this is the total strength of the 8-eye giant spider. It seems that there are a few people. It is no wonder that these giant spiders have been entrenched in the Forbidden Forest for decades at this point. There is no way to completely eliminate the giant spiders. After a while, 2 more horsemen came over, and it seemed that the people were all there. Betty stood on a stone and began to assign pre-war missions. Seeing Betty arrange tasks one by one, Ryan began to feel a little bored. While he was distracted, he suddenly heard Betty click his name. Ryan, now let's show you those plants that make us have a heart. Then we can make the final arrangements. No problem, Mom. Ryan bowed, and then released each of the plants that were going to be used in the war today, and demonstrated how these plants attacked. After watching the attack of these plants, several horsemen who used to look at Ryan with disgusted eyes immediately changed their attitudes, and they looked around and left and right. They should be the opposition of the Ronan faction, that Ferenc said. However, the horseman's thinking is still much more straightforward than that of humans. Soon, a tall horseman walked in front of Ryan. He looked older, with a red horse body, red hair and red beard. The horseman came to Lane and said, Human, I'm Ronan. I admit that your ability makes you indispensable in this battle. I apologize for my discrimination against you. Lane accepted his apology. Betty looked at this scene and smiled, and then began to arrange specific combat allocation. Ryan and the Grey Wolf are assigned to a group, and the task is to arrange a blocking position at the designated location. Lane incidentally distributed some supplies to the horsemen. After receiving the mission, Ryan rushed to the designated location with the Grey Wolf, because the time left for them was only 1.5 hours, and after 1.5 hours, the hunting began. Chapter 93, Position Layout. The British afternoon sun in September is not very strong, especially in the Forbidden Forest. The sunlight shining through the branches and leaves is like a thin pillar. There is a poetic beauty. But soon, such beautiful scenery was broken. A gong-like voice came from the Forbidden Forest. Hey, kid, I really don't know why Betty wants us to be a group. Look at my size, look at my teeth. Look at my claws. I clearly should be fighting on the front line, not as a coolie hiding behind everyone. After, there was another chatter, which was nothing more than a glorious experience of the master who narrated the voice. And Ryan was helplessly covering his forehead next to the voice master. In his impression, the wolf is generally silent. So when he was assigned to perform a task with a wolf, He was a little worried that the task would be too boring. But what I did not expect was that this wolf not only spoke, but also talked about tuberculosis. Ever since I left the meeting place, I have been talking about it, and I have nothing to do with the coldness of waiting for the assignment at the meeting place. Especially with his somewhat amused eyes while talking, Ryan deeply suspected that this wolf might be some kind of wolf and husky hybrid. Mr. Wolf, don't just talk to me. I don't know where that place is. It's all up to you, Ryan asked with some concern. After all, he was not familiar with the Forbidden Forest. Relax, I've lived here for 15 years, I won't go wrong even with my eyes closed. Wolf said, and then he asked again, can you tell me more about those? What is TV used for? Lane had no choice but to explain to him what TV is. Speaking of Wolf is also an unlucky guy. It is actually a child born by two werewolves after doing something in the wolf state. He was abandoned as soon as he was born. Fortunately, Professor Dumbledore took him to the Forbidden Forest and let the horses raise him. Don't look at him as a wolf, but in fact its lifespan and IQ are similar to humans. So in the face of a teenager eager for the outside world, it is difficult to meet a person who can communicate. Of course, keep asking the outside world. After walking for more than 10 minutes in this exchange, the two finally came to the predetermined position, a mountain bag slightly raised by the small river, and there were no trees around it. Why do I always see the open space in the forest when I see the residents in the Forbidden Forest? Even if I plan to attack the enemy this time, I have to choose the open space. Is the open space a lucky place in the Forbidden Forest? Lane said puzzledly. Of course, in the Forbidden Forest, all wise creatures are at the top of the food chain of the entire Forbidden Forest. So they don't need to hide themselves. If they don't need to hide, then the place where they can see the sky is the best. For example, I mean when the sun is not bright during the day, it will be basking in the open space of the forest, especially in the morning. Otherwise, the dew in the forest will make the hair on the body wet and uncomfortable. Wolf explained seriously. As for why you should choose this kind of place to ambush, you must know that spiders can climb trees. If you ambush them in the forest area, you must always worry about the top of your head. Not to mention that you will have fire on several plants this time. It's miserable when the forest is lit. Sounds very reasonable. Once you have learned what you have learned, is this that all things are wise? Is it true that you must maintain a humble heart on the road to knowledge so that you can learn more? It took an hour and Ryan had enough plants around. Here is a compliment to the potato mines, which can clearly distinguish the enemy from the enemy. So after spending half an hour planting this open field with other plants, the rest of the time Ryan and Wolf kept planting potato mines in the nearby forest. When he was working, Ryan suddenly thought that he clearly wanted to kill the basilisk in the Hogwarts chamber. So he came to the Forbidden Forest to get some materials. How did things develop so far that he is going to participate in a battle, and still serve as an important participant in this battle? What is the difference between this behavior and starting to plant trees just to eat apples? But since everything is here now and things are done to this point, it is certainly impossible to retreat. It's better to get things right. But from here, Ryan also found that he was actually guided by the horseman Betty in the negotiation before making his current choice. I have to say that none of the leaders can be stupid. Ryan can only thank Betty for not being malicious this time, and killing those spiders is also in his own interest. But it also sounded the alarm for Ryan. After all, the next person who leads him is not necessarily a good person. But this kind of human experience can only be gradually familiarized with more experience, and there is no way to speed up. Since this is the case, all the salted fish mentality at this time is the most correct. When the arrangement was almost the same, there was an explosion in the distance. Lane heard the sound of the cherry bomb he had given to the horses. The spiders are coming over. Lane hurried back to the pre-prepared position on the top of the hill and began to prepare. Wolf relied on himself to run fast, and buried a few potato mines before slowly returning to the hill. With the explosion approaching slowly, some horseshoe sounds also mixed in. In addition, there are some strange noises. Soon, Ryan saw the horses rushing out of the woods. Although it didn't seem to be hurt, Ryan observed that each of them looked tired, and the 2 quiver bags he prepared were almost shot. Only the quiver on his back was still full. No wonder they can become a symbol of the war in the cold weapon era. Ryan has seen their quiver, and each quiver puts an average of about 30 arrows. It can shoot 60 arrows in a short time, which is far beyond the level of human beings. The rear of the hall was rushed by unicorns. From time to time, they also sent lightning from the unicorn to attack the Forbidden Forest behind them. It is indeed a magical creature comparable to the dragon. When all his own combatants retreated to the hill, Lane transferred the control of the plant to several horsemen and Wolf respectively. This is one of the pre-planned plans. After all, these horses know more about the enemy and can bring greater damage to the 8-eyed giant spider. Ryan walked to the just-prepared magic circle, which was learned from Moshine Road, mainly to provide energy for users, but also to provide a simple shelter around the circle, so that the affected people are not affected by yin evil. This array is relatively simple, and it took only 3 minutes for Ryan to set it up. The appearance looks like the magic circle is to nail the ground with copper nails, and then use the blood red line of the to wind around the copper nails to form a formation. The only difference from the original is that Ryan chose the crystal of sunlight to provide energy to the circle, because the optional consumables in his hand are this one. Fortunately, this choice also gives this circle a stronger positive energy and stronger restraint against the eight-eyed giant spider. Everything was ready, and I heard a clicking sound in the jungle, and the eight-eyed giant spiders came. Chapter 94, Battle Giant Spider. As the click sound grew louder, the eight-eyed giant spiders finally came out of the jungle. At the same time, the horse people began to direct the shooting of these plants. These eight-eyed giant spiders rushed over are as large dogs, and their speed is extremely agile. Ryan was thankful that he gave the shooting command to the horseman. Otherwise, according to his previous experience of shooting slow-moving zombies, he would not be able to hit these eight-eyed giant spiders. While the pressure on the front is not too high, Lane carefully observed these spiders. These spiders are very agile and passable. Ryan saw with his own eyes not only the rushing spiders on the ground, but even some of them fell from the trees. Whereas the magical animal in the book once said that the eight-eyed giant spider is from the remote East Indies of Southeast Asia, and is not a native of Britain. Obviously, they have no natural enemies here, so they formed a serious biological invasion. Think that these eight-eyed giant spiders all eat meat, even if the insect hunting frequency and appetite are not as good as mammals. But looking at the number of eight-eyed giant spiders in front of them, it is easy to analyze that they have caused devastating damage to the local biological chain. Soon, the first batch of eight-eyed giant spiders rushed out of the woods and fell down under the shooting of machine gun peas. Ryan just wanted to breathe a sigh of relief, but found a dignified expression on the face of Wolf next to him, and explained to Ryan the first wave is only the reconnaissance force, and then the large force. The eight-eyed giant spider is not an ordinary animal, they have wisdom. Ryan clenched her wand and stared at the forest, and there was a dense click in the forest. Lane could feel the anger of the spiders hiding in the forest. With a sharp voice, the spiders came out of the forest as if to hear the charge, and the densely rounded shape was like a small mountain bag. At the same time, some spiders also tried to bypass the river and attack from the back of the hill. Fortunately, Ryan used water lilies to lay out a batch of plants on the water surface. They easily dried out the large spiders affected by the water flow and the mud on the bottom of the water. Although the attackers were killed, the pressure in front of them was increasing, not only the number of spiders, but also the body size gradually increasing. There are even spiders as big as horses pulling carts out of the woods. We just shot a dozen cherry bombs with arrows and shot them into the gathering area. How did they all move out? Wolf exclaimed in the gap between the commanding plants. We just want to lure the enemy out of the hole. I've done it before, but I've never drawn so much. What is going on this time? Lin used psychedelic mushroom spores as a casting material to release the ancient Viking magic deterrents. The eight-eyed giant spider was obviously affected by the artificial dark creature. Several spiders in the cast range twisted together, and also slowed down the speed of the part of the spider's movement, creating a better chance for the plants to shoot. When Ryan reached out and took the psychedelic mushroom bun from his pocket, he asked Wolf, "You said you have lured the enemy out of the hole several times. Did you throw explosives into the other's den before? How could we have these things before?" "We just tied some kind of insect repellent herbs to the arrows." Ryan felt that he knew why these eight-eyed giant spiders suddenly burst their nests. In the past, the horseman's attack was equivalent to throwing into the neighbor's house. Although it is unbearable, the actual harm is not great. This time, more than a dozen explosive cherries tied together with a cluster grenades, which obviously caused serious injuries. No wonder the eight-eyed giant spider will fry the pan. But it is useless to think about something else, just right. Lean looked at the field and found that although the eight-eyed giant spider's attack was fierce, however, the heavy firepower output of the own plant, plus the explosion of the cherry arrow and the shooting of Ryan's own magic, completely prevented the attack of the eight-eyed giant spider. Although the ammunition of the machine gun pea is not very harmful to the body of the larger spider inside, because it is spherical, it has poor penetration. However, it can easily break their legs and paralyze them on the battlefield. And among the plants he took out, Ryan found that the most effective were dragon grass and potato mines. Among them, the dragon grass is a natural enemy for the downy spiders. Even if it is only slightly caught, the spider will be burned into a ball of fire in a few seconds. The only regret is that in order to prevent the forest from being ignited, the fire dragon grass is arranged in the inner circle, and the attack range is not large. The potato thunder is controlled by Miss Betty. Through communication with the forest, she accurately finds the gathering point of the spider, and then detonates the potato mine near the gathering point. Although they cannot kill spiders, the power of the explosion can easily destroy these spiders' fragile legs and make them lose their fighting power. After more than half an hour of hard work, the sound of broken trees suddenly came from the woods, and the last giant spider like a baby appeared on the battlefield. After seeing them, the spider waved its claws and made a clear audible click. You reading www. UUCanShu.com can hear its anger from the sound. Mozag. Lane could see the surprise on the face of Wolf next to him. Who is Mozag? Ryan searched the memory and found that he didn't remember the name at all. Mozag is a spider mother. If there is no major event, it will not appear outside the valley. She came out very abnormally this time. Wolf replied. Fortunately, the big spider's words let Ryan know what happened. It turned out that the explosive error might have flew directly to the entrance of the nest because of the wind. In addition to destroying a part of the eggs, Araguk's 2 legs were also broken. So as Araguk's spouse, Mozag vowed to kill all the people here and eat them. Is clearly hunting. How did it become a decisive battle? However, Ryan, because he is also in the circle, is about to be eaten. He decided to do his best to fight. Thinking of this, he opened the space door leading to the world of Plants vs. Zombies. Then he took out several baskets of explosive cherries, which is also his most recent inventory. In addition, the Crazy Dave saw Ryan after contacting the space door and asked for any help. Finally, after Ryan promised him to give him no less than 20 spider bodies, he gave Ryan 2 revolver machine guns and 10,000 bullets. In addition, there is a small box of grenades. This was recently found from a military base while sorting out the recovered cities. Because these things are not very good for zombies, Dave was given to Ryan as a humankind. Unfortunately, because there is no military factory, the time of the end of the eruption is too long. It seems that there are not many bullets that can be used, and it is already very good to give Ryan 10,000 rounds. When these weapons were delivered, Ryan felt that he was full of energy and felt that he might have a big harvest this time. Chapter 95, The End of Darkness. After taking out the machine gun and turning on the power, Ryan was surprised to find that this is actually a version equipped with a smart computer, and the method of use is as simple as the game. He couldn't help being thankful that this was a forbidden forest. If he wanted to be in the school, this would be a pile of scrap iron. The battlefield fell into a strange calm at this time. Mozag retreated into the forbidden forest to avoid the attack of the P machine gun shooter, because she needed time to gather more spiders in order to offset the fire advantage of Ryan by the number advantage. After all, there are not many people on Ryan's side, and the place chosen at the time for defensive convenience is not large. Because no one could think that the 8-eyed giant spiders would come out of the nest this time, resulting in insufficient firepower density in this area. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the horsemen and unicorns also began to take a short break. After all, although the horsemen have strong physical strength, it is still very tired to use the physical strength to open the bow. The unicorn also needs time to restore its magic. Wolf started to arrange potato torpedoes flexibly on the basis of his own small actions. When Ryan took out 2 machine guns, Fearon walked over curiously and asked, "What is this?" "Muzz weapon," Ryan replied, and after that he turned on the smart computer on the machine gun to show Fearon's. Soon this attracted a lot of horsemen to come and see. This is the quick launch of the metal block, which is actually similar to a bow and arrow. If there is targeted magic protection, it will not be useful. But I think this is a good weapon for those spiders. Because those 8-eyed giant spiders we don't have magic protection at all. Miss Betty made a fair assessment after watching the demo on the computer. After Miss Betty appointed 2 horsemen to operate the 2 machine guns. Ryan asked Betty with some curiosity, "Don't you taboo this?" "Because I know many wizards reject everything about moles." "Of course we do not taboo, as long as we can maintain the balance of nature, most of the means are acceptable. But you can also rest assured that no wizard will know what is happening here, because this is a forbidden forest. When we protect nature, of course, will also cover us. Not to mention that your principal went out early this morning. Other people, even if they have the heart, don't have the ability to detect what is happening here." Soon the 2 horsemen were carrying machine guns and arranged positions on both sides of the soil so that they could form a crossfire when they hit each other for a while. Soon, with a sharp voice like a glass stroke, large swarms of spiders poured out of the trees like floods. Lane quickly uses magic to disturb spiders. In this dense charge, as long as a spider is disturbed, a chain reaction can be triggered to create enough chaos. This can slow down the speed of the spiders and allow them to be exposed to the plants for a longer period of time. Slowly, the spiders opened a way with their bodies. Miss Betty detonated many potato mines and delayed the spiders' progress, but the spiders still filled the vacancies as quickly as the tide. Finally, Miss Betty detonated the potato mine belt around the hill at the same time, and then used the explosion to disturb the spiders' balance-sensing organs, causing the spiders to huddle together. The machine guns arranged on both sides of the hill opened fire. At this time, the field became a slaughter. Compared with the P cannot penetrate the spider. These 7.62 mm machine gun bullets easily penetrate the bodies of several spiders. Spiders are not zombies. They can only stop them if they are completely disrupted. After receiving some damage, many spiders lose their sense of direction and no longer move forward. These spiders make the entire spider group denser and more convenient for machine gun slaughter. At the same time, horsemen also tied cherry bombs to arrows and shot at the dense areas of spiders. Even more smoothly, the spider squeezed into a ball became a good combustion aid for the fire dragon's flame, and later, even a sea of fire was burned near the small mountain bag. Mosag was wiped out by the fire when he took the lead, and it thought that it could withstand the arrows of the horse to open a way for the children and grandchildren, but did not expect the horse people to use the cherry bomb to set fire at the first time, which caused it to die on the spot. And the remaining spiders lacked sufficient intelligence, blindly swelling the pigs according to Mosag's last command, and finally all were wiped out. When the remnant spider was driven by instinct and fled to the nest in 3s and 2s. This battle can also declare victory. At this time, the sun began to slowly set west. In the afterglow of the sunset, you could see the open space in front of you filled with various corpses of spiders. There is a cruel beauty. Betty ordered several wounded horsemen to collect loot, and then began to hunt down the spider with other people who could fight. Ferns bent his legs, allowing Ryan to crawl on his back. Lane saw Luonan running past him. Only one glance did not object, so he rode on Ferencz's back, because he really couldn't keep up with these horsemen in the jungle. On the way, Ryan asked Ferenc, "As far as I know, don't you horsemen generally not allow humans to ride on their backs?" "Yes, under normal circumstances we see this as an insult, but now we participate in a common battle for the sake of maintaining natural harmony." At this time, in order to fight, the comrades who are not good at running are placed on the back and not an insult. But comrades in arms help each other as if you provided us with plants and weapons. Walked through the jungle for less than 10 minutes, and they finally came to the small valley entrance of the spider's nest. Through the mouth of the valley, Lane discovered that everyone was standing idly in the mouth of a cave. Once these spiders failed, they transferred with Aragog to this cave for spawning. Because a large number of spiders are blocked in the hole, there is no way for everyone to attack, and the machine gun bullets have been used up. The horseman as a novice basically did not release the trigger when shooting. However, there are not many cherry bombs left. After dropping a few spiders and finding that spiders came out of the cave to fill their seats, they gave up the plan to blow up the road. Then Ryan rushed over. He opened the box and tried to open the grenade, but was surprised to find that it was not a normal grenade, but a warm-pressed grenades. This power is much higher than ordinary grenades, and Ryan even wanted to keep this thing for use when playing the basilisk. But when I thought of playing the basilisk, I was in that small space, so I gave up this kind of suicide plan. Ryan quickly informed the horses of the effects of these grenades. After several investigating, horsemen determined that the cave was not particularly large and had no other exits. The final battle would begin. It is estimated that after this battle is over, the darkness that has been entrenched in the Forbidden Forest for decades should be completely resolved. The power of nature is great. When these dark creatures are completely wiped out, all kinds of creatures will also return here, letting everything go back to the time when it was alive. Chapter 96. End and Harvest. Standing at the entrance of the cave, Ryan had to lament the magic of fate. Originally just an ordinary hunt, it turned out to be such a complete cleanup of the 8-eyed giant spider now. But looking at the faces of the horses around, Ryan found that they were very happy with this unexpected situation. After all, for them, this also completely eliminated a major scourge in the Forbidden Forest. Even if this is unplanned, it will not affect their good mood, although it is like this to block the entrance of a group of old, weak and sick creatures to completely eliminate them. It seems that they are somewhat like villains. But it is also a very important principle to eliminate evil. Ryan doesn't think this is an evil behavior. After all, the unicorns as a symbol of kindness have not opposed this practice. This also made Ryan couldn't help but think of the judgment on the Death Eaters after defeating Voldemort for the first time. Many Death Eaters had so many lives on their hands that only put them in prison and imprisoned. This led to the death of these Voldemort buddies after the resurrection of the original Lord Voldemort and created more killings. If you kill them all before, wouldn't you die so many people later? In this respect, Ryan felt that the wizards of Britain had no righteous unicorns. Thinking about some of them, Ryan was not idle. He tied all the grenades into a large cluster grenades, and then discussed the battle plan with the horsemen. With Betty's order, several horsemen threw all the remaining 7 or 8 cherry bombs to the hole. With a few bangs and explosions, the spider in the hole was cleared. While the spider in the hole had not yet rushed out, Ryan directed the cluster grenades directly into the hole with his wand, and at the same time pulled the fuse of the grenade with magic. Feeling that the grenade successfully flew deep into the cave, Ryan shouted to hide. Then Jianbu Rufai ran behind a stone and crouched and hugged his head while opening his mouth. Just after hiding, Ryan heard a huge explosion and even felt the shock waves in the air make his internal organs a little uncomfortable. Even if he had covered his ears and opened his mouth in advance, the loud noise still made his ears buzz. After confirming that the explosion had ended, Lane walked out of his hiding place. At this time, the horsemen and unicorns also came out of their respective hiding places. Lane just wanted to observe the result of the explosion, and saw a dark shadow rushing from the mouth of the valley. It turned out to be Mr. Huowol, because he couldn't cover his ears, so he had to wait outside the mouth of the valley first. My god, what a terrible explosion. You don't know, I even saw a spider leg flying directly in front of me. Wolf began to describe what he saw at the mouth of the valley thing. Lin also clearly saw the scene at this time. The mouth of the cave spewed out the remains of the spider and the green blood in a radial pattern, and some of the remaining bodies burned large and small flames. Lane released the magic of investigating life into the cave and found that the spider inside was dead. After more than 10 minutes, the two horsemen went into the hole for inspection. When they came out, they reported that the spiders near the explosion heart were all shattered, especially when they found Aragog's blown head on a sharp stone in the cave. In addition, the shape of more spiders is still intact, which may be smothered or burned. They found dozens of eggs in the deepest part of the cave, but they were all cooked by high temperature. It seems that the problem of the 8-eyed giant spider in the Forbidden Forest has been completely solved this time, and everyone who participated in this battle has a smile on his face. Then the unicorn said goodbye and Betty arranged for the horses to collect the spoils from the spiders. Lane still set up altars in the two battlefields according to the previous rules, and then purged the land that was filled with death due to the battle. By the way, pick the dead spider with good quality and give it to the Crazy Dave through the time gate. The purification at the Riverside station was completed soon, but the purification in the 8-eyed giant spider's lair was far more difficult than imagined. In the end, Ryan had to consume a lot of magic materials that had been hoarded before it was purified. After the ceremony, Lane thought that this forest had accumulated countless souls due to the killing of the 8-eyed giant spider. The 8-eyed giant spider as a dark creature polluted the jungle and prevented these souls from returning to nature. During these decades, the soul was gradually polluted by the dark environment. So Ryan purified not only the soul of the 8-eyed giant spider, but also the soul accumulated over the past few decades. Although the loss in material is not small, Ryan still gains a lot. The most important gain is that his soul magic has been further strengthened. At the same time, every time a soul is purified, Ryan can feel that his merits have increased by 1 point, and at the same time can accelerate his spiritual cultivation. At the same time, because he cleared the 8-eyed giant spider in the Forbidden Forest, Lane gained 6 offset points. After doing all this, Ryan found that the sun had set, and he had to go back to the castle quickly. Miss Betty asked Wolf to send Lane to the entrance of the Forbidden Forest, and after a week's appointment, Wolf would send materials obtained from the treated spider to Lane. Notice. On the way back, Wolf chattered as usual. Ryan could only listen with a smile. At the exit of the Forbidden Forest, Ryan found that Wolf seemed to be reluctant. I also want to let a creature with a young soul live with those nagging horsemen for a long time, and it is already a lucky thing not to recover from depression. So Ryan promised Wolf to come to see him as long as he was okay, and then he would ask Aunt Betty to inform him at a specific time. After comforting Wolf, Lane returned to the castle smoothly. It is a pity that the time is already 7:30, and the time for dinner has passed. Lane thought that the compressed biscuits he had stuffed in the space bag last time had not been eaten, so he decided to go back to the dormitory and used cold water with compressed biscuits to deal with this meal. After dragging his tired body into the common room, a brown hairy head broke into his vision. Then he dragged him to the corner of the common room and there was a hurry and fast nag. "Ryan, where did you go? I didn't see you when I was eating. Your roommate said you were not in the dormitory in the afternoon. If I can't find you again, I will tell Professor McGonagall." Lane felt a little guilty to see Hermione angry. After all, worrying about others is not a gentleman's act. So he organized a statement saying, "I'm sorry Hermione, I worried you. I went to the Forbidden Forest in the afternoon to meet an interesting friend." Then Ryan diverted Hermione's attention by introducing Wolf's life and experience, and also gave her an explanation. When explaining to Hermione, Ryan also felt a little happy. After all, this kind of feeling that someone cared about himself was really good. Chapter 97, Post-War Trivia. After listening to Ryan's narration, Hermione's attention was really attracted. "Oh my god, he's so pitiful. Souls that are similar to humans are going to live as wolves. Obviously it's not his fault, but let him bear everything. It's not that bad," Ryan said quickly as Hermione was making up for Wolf's miserable life. After all, think about the efforts made by the house elves in the back. He didn't want Hermione to set up the Wolf Protection Association in advance. Although life is a bit boring to the horse people, Mr. Wolf is clearly integrated into the life there. He does not dislike life as a wolf, but just feels too boring. "Yes," Hermione said after listening to Ryan's persuasion. After all, Harry met the horseman last year, and from her narrative, Hermione knew that the horseman was a kind creature. The only problem is that there are some problems in communicating with other creatures. After listening to Ryan's narration, Hermione knew that Ryan had promised Wolf to chat with him when he was free. He asked to bring her with her next chat. Thinking that there would be no danger, Lane nodded and agreed to Hermione's request. Finally, Hermione took out the newspaper-wrapped sandwich and a bottle of pumpkin juice from the school bag and handed it to Ryan. "I think you didn't have dinner tonight. These are the ones I took for you." "Thank you very much." Lane took the food and gulped. After all, fighting in the Forbidden Forest for an afternoon, Lane was really hungry. After Ryan finished eating, he went upstairs back to the dormitory and took a school bag with Hermione to read in the library. The days after returned to calm, and Ryan and Hermione took the time to chat with Wolf for a few days. In addition, he also got paid for the last battle, a full 3 liters of 8-eyed giant venom, more than 30 liters of 8-eyed giant spider's blood and a large bag of processed 8-eyed giant spider shell. These were all brought by Fearens to get 2 large baskets on horseback. As soon as he got the things, Ryan threw them directly into the grocery store, because the grocery store can keep it fresh. Originally, thousands of 8-eyed giant spiders could get more than that. Unfortunately, repeated explosions and flames during the battle destroyed a lot of things. Especially the 8-eyed giant spider venom can only be collected from the last group of 8-eyed giant spiders guild, because these venoms quickly fail after the 8-eyed giant spider dies. This is why the 8-eyed giant spider venom is so expensive. Of course, this encounter also temporarily suspended Ryan's plan to kill the basilisk. After all, there were so many accidents just hitting a big spider, which also made him discover a lot of problems that he had not noticed before. So Ryan designed some weapons and asked Dave of Plants vs. Zombie World to help make them. Since the world of Plants vs. Zombies is in a busy state of recovery, everyone is very busy, so it may take a month or 2 to build these weapons. But this delay is also beneficial. After all, the basilisk is also a cold-blooded animal. Although there is magic protection from hibernation, it should still be affected in winter. In a month or 2, the weather will be colder and more conducive to hunting snakes. But this time will not be wasted. Ryan will use this time to draw a batch of spells with spider carapace and spider blood to strengthen his strength. So the time passed slowly in the practice, and soon to mid-October. The British weather was cold during this period. Especially when you live in an old castle, you will feel more clearly how difficult this time is. And this situation also caused a cold epidemic. The wizard's magic did not bring them much resistance on this. Fortunately, after a period of exercise, Ryan, who has improved physique, did not have a cold this year. So he can watch the grandeur of many students' ears smoking after Madame Pomfrey took the cold medicine. Because of continuous rainy days, Ryan can often see the players of the Gryffindor team muddy and walked in from the outside tiredly. It is also very hard to practice in this rainy weather. So Ryan developed a brown sugar tea recipe, and then asked the Weasley brothers to bring them to the house elves in the kitchen during the night tour. From the next day, a pot of brown sugar tea was warmed on the fireplace in the common room. Everyone is also much less likely to catch a cold because of rain. Although few people knew that this was Ryan's idea, it was a pleasure to see the classmates getting rid of influenza. Of course, Mrs. Pomfrey is one of the insiders. After all, it is for the students to eat, so the house elf naturally asked her to identify it when she got the recipe opened by Lane. In the last hospitalization, Mrs. Pomfrey knew Lane's handwriting, so she soon knew who had written the recipe. After confirming that this formula is very effective in preventing everyone's cold, Mrs. Pomfrey called Ryan to the school hospital and asked him how he did it. Fortunately, the medical method of the wizarding world adheres to the cognition of wet, cold, hot and cold in ancient Greece. This coincides with many theories of traditional Chinese medicine, so Ryan finally invited his father to Chinatown to buy several English versions of traditional Chinese medicine books and sent them to school, and then gave them to Mrs. Pomfrey. I have to say that most of the faculty and staff in the school are elites. Even if Mrs. Pomfrey can throw away at least 2 second-rate Chinese medicine lanes at the medical level, she still seriously studies these unseen medical knowledge and asks students who do not understand places like Lane, mind and easy to learn, no shame to ask. It is no wonder that Mrs. Pomfrey, who can have this kind of mentality, can become a Hogwarts therapist. This mentality can make her an elite no matter what industry she is in. One afternoon, Ryan just came out of the school hospital and was going back to the common room. I saw Nick, almost headless, holding a letter nervously. So he stepped forward and said hello. Hi, sir. What are you doing here? I received a reply from the Headless Hunters team. I hope they will accept me this time, Nick said uneasy. After opening the letter, he opened the letter, but soon his expression turned into a frustrated expression. It's almost half an inch, and I don't want it, Nick was thinking. Ryan saw that Nick was sad and decided to comfort him. After all, it was thanks to him last time that he was able to use the responsive room. Sir, if you have any sad things, you can sit down and tell me slowly. I think you might be better off talking. After that, Ryan made a request. Oh, you are willing to listen to Nick snagging. Thank you so much. After Nick finished following Ryan, he walked into an empty storage room beside him. Ryan cleaned up a few wooden boxes and sat on a small wooden box. Then he used the big wooden box as a table, and Nick sat down on the other side of the wooden box. After the two were seated, Ryan said, I think I have a newly learned magic that should make you happy. Chapter 98, Nick's Invitation. Ryan's so-called new magic was actually learned from the Moshan Taoist code. He felt that the magic of ghosts should make Nick happy. So in Nick's curious eyes, Ryan pulled out a small incense burner, a string of incense, and a pair of candles from the space bag. Finally, 2 chocolates were taken from the pocket of the robe. After taking things away, Lane arranged the censer and candles on the box in front of him, and then placed the chocolate behind the censer. When everything was in place, Lane lit 2 candles with his wand. Then Ryan picked up a string of incense and lit it on the candle, then held the incense with her eyes closed. Nick doesn't know what Ryan is doing, but it can be seen from Ryan's behavior that he is doing this very seriously, so Nick kept quiet at this time to avoid disturbing Ryan. For a time, The storage room fell into silence. Only Ryan's soft chanting sound echoed through the room. The sound of someone walking outside in the corridor wearing wet shoes was particularly clear. After 3 or 4 minutes, Nick saw Lane put the incense in his hand in the incense burner. Then he opened his eyes and strove hard at Xiang. I saw that the incense was blown through by this breath and it was completely burned in a few seconds. The smoke from the burning is absorbed by the chocolate on the table. After blowing that breath, Ryan returned to normal. He picked up the chocolate on the table and handed Nick. Said, Jazz, you can have some chocolate, which will help you to recover. Nick reached out to get the chocolate in Ryan's hand, and said, I'm glad you comforted me, but you must know that our ghost can't. Hadn't finished speaking yet, the expression on Nick's face changed a lot, because he could feel as if he had got something, which hadn't been felt for him for 500 years. After all, among the ghosts of Hogwarts, only Pippi, a ghost that is not a ghost, can touch the real thing, and other ghosts can't touch anything. Nick retracted his hand and found that the 2 pieces of chocolate were still in Ryan's hands. But in his palm he held 2 pieces of milky white translucent chocolate. Is this? Nick asked Ryan in surprise. You know, my blood is from the East. Recently, I learned some magic from the East, and this is one of them. Through the power of incense, ghosts can also enjoy food. Nick put a piece of chocolate in his mouth with a shocked expression, and then Ryan saw his tears flow down the corner of his eyes. After all, he had not eaten for 500 years. After eating 2 pieces of chocolate with tears in his eyes, Ryan found Nick's frustration swept away. He said happily to Ryan, thank you for letting me taste the food again. Compared to this, not participating in the Headless Cavaliers is no longer a big deal for me. After he finished speaking, Nick suddenly twitched. Ryan, I think I have a presumptuous request. No, it's too much. You have helped a lot. I shouldn't make it. Sir, what on earth do you want to express? Ryan asked, looking at the entangled Nick. I just wanted to ask you if the magic was difficult for you just now, because I think you just cast a wandless cast. Nick finally asked his question. It's not too difficult. It belongs to the magic of the celestial system. It is the same as the African wizards who cast without rods, so it is not as difficult as it looks. But I can only make 5 or 6 such things that the ghosts can eat, food, and these foods can be kept for up to 7 days. Lane replied. It looks like this. After tangling for a long time, Nick finally said his request. Halloween is my 500-year-old birthday this year. I will invite ghosts from all over the UK to my inheritance banquet. Can you prepare food for the banquet for me? Speaking of which, Nick thought of something and added quickly, of course, this will take up a lot of your time and energy, so I will have a generous gift for you. Know that I have lived in this castle for 500 years. Know the secrets that many others do not know. Well, I promise you, Lane replied. When you come to call me a week before Halloween, we will start work in the request room. But it can be said in advance that my cooking level is very average. It is estimated that you have to find someone else to cook. It's no problem. I'll just talk to the house elf in the kitchen. Nick was very happy after hearing Ryan's consent, and quickly guaranteed that Ryan wouldn't have to consider the question of meals. After Nick's happy, Ryan said goodbye because he had to spend several days thinking about the recipe this time. Afterwards, I can surprise all ghosts at the party. After seeing Nick leave through the wall, Ryan also returned to Gryffindor's common room. The public lounge is very lively, because the weather is not very good these days, so everyone hopes to stay in the warm public lounge. At this time, the Weasley brothers were feeding a fire lizard to pull out fireworks, causing the fire lizard to fly around in the lounge with fire and explosion. Fortunately, the fireworks in the magic world cannot ignite things under the influence of magic. Otherwise, in this house that is full of combustibles such as carpets, tapestries and wooden furniture, it is too easy to cause a fire. Then came the voice of Percy reprimanding the twins and the cheers of some classmates. This time Ryan squeezed into the crowd and handed some data about the human body learned from Madame Pomfrey to Fred, because they said they wanted to study some interesting sweets before, so they needed these data. Lynn suspects that they are starting to study quick action skipping sugar now, so these data are needed to determine the amount of some drugs. Take the small notebook that Ryan handed in. Fred asked Ryan, "Hey, Ryan, would you like to join our research?" Ryan hadn't had time to answer. Percy suddenly appeared from the side and asked, "I hope you are not doing some messy research, otherwise I will write to my mother." "No, of course not," George replied. "We just wanted to ask Ryan some questions about the potion of potions and the use of some curses, because we saw Madame Pomfrey teaching him alone in the hospital 2 days ago." "Really?" Percy asked excitedly. "Yes," Lane nodded. After, Percy expressed a series of emotions about the behavior of the twins. Finally, it was hard to wait for Percy to leave. When he saw Percy going to scold a group of first-year students who were noisy and affecting others, Ryan told the twins that he was honored to join their research. Ryan is curious about the new imagination of the twins after they have joined themselves and have more funds, materials and knowledge. Chapter 99. Banquet Preparation. The time soon came to a week before Halloween. At noon that day, after sending Mr. Wolf a large bag of Mile novels and taking back the book he had lent him last time, he met Colin Clive in the castle corridor and brought Nick's message, 7 p.m. Assemble at a predetermined location. It seems that Nick's preparations for the Halloween party are about to begin, and Lane returns to the common room while thinking. It happened to meet Hermione waiting for him. Because when I saw Mr. Wolf last time, Wolf suggested that life in the Forbidden Forest was too boring, and asked if they had any entertainment methods. And Hermione, who likes reading, suggested that reading is a good entertainment. So Ryan and Hermione lent some leisure books that were taken to school at that time to Wolf. At that time, the two of them also discussed which book Wolf liked more. So Hermione now blocked Ryan and wanted to know exactly what Wolf's taste for reading was. Wolf said he liked all his books because he was so boring before, and now he would like to read any piece of paper with words 5 times. It seems that he is still a studious wolf, and I can ask my father to send me my encyclopedia next time. Hermione is very fond of all creatures who love learning. Even if he is a wolf, he is willing to satisfy the curiosity of a wolf. The class for one day was finished soon. All the classes except Lockhart's drama performance class were fine. I really don't understand why Dumbledore asked such people to be teachers. Is it to tell everyone what is a typical failure? After dinner, Ryan immediately rushed to the room where there was a request, preparing to start making a feast of ghosts. After entering, he found that Nick had been waiting there with 5 or 6 dishes. Every dish is hot and looks better than in the cafeteria. Think about it. Even if the house elves have such magic, there is no way to make the canteen cauldron as delicate and delicious as the individually prepared meals. After Ryan started casting spells, it took more than half an hour to finally transform the 6 dishes on the table into a soul state. At this time, Ryan took out the rune paper and put it on the plate, and then told Nick to let the elf move the plate to the designated location, but never remove the rune paper. Because of the role of these runes, the plates in these physical states can hold soul food. Once the runes are removed, they cannot be moved. After making these foods, Ryan tasted the rest of the food. It turned out that although these foods did not change their appearance, they lost all their flavor, and they tasted like chewing plastic. After some tired Ryan sat on the sofa and chatted with Nick. Suddenly Ryan thought that the ghosts known by Nick were distributed throughout the UK. Some of them even witnessed some important historical events. Maybe they could ask something interesting. So Ryan asked Nick, "Yes, can I take part in your banquet as a living person?" Nick was surprised when he heard, "I would be very welcome if you can join, but I think you might prefer the school banquet to our cold party. So I didn't dare to invite you. This banquet is not just you, you can even ask your friends to come together. I think the more people, the better." After returning to the common room, Ryan announced this matter in the study group, but most of the students did not want to attend this banquet. For example, Ron, who is writing homework for a potion lesson, thinks it is strange to celebrate his death. He thinks that banquet will be very dull. Most other students also have this view, but Hermione told Ryan she would go. After all, she has not found a few living people to attend such a banquet from the book. Not to mention that Ryan told her that many of the important events in the book will also attend this banquet. The next day when Ryan went to the request room, Hermione also followed because she was curious about how Ryan made human food into ghost food. Nick expresses his heartfelt thanks to Hermione for her participation. While Ryan casts a spell, Hermione has been staring at Ryan trying to learn the tricks inside. It's a pity that the language barrier can't pass at all. She can't understand what Ryan's Chinese means. In the end, Hermione could only give up her plan to learn this magic he had never seen before, but at the same time she also lamented the magic of Oriental magic and complained that there are very few records in Hogwarts in the Eastern world, and there is no way to satisfy her curiosity. 2 days before Halloween, Ryan and Hermione had just entered the request room and saw Nick twirling around in midair. Lane saw this situation and quickly asked, "What happened?" "I think you are a little bit depressed." "I made a big mistake," Nick said guiltily, "because I want everyone to taste a variety of delicacies. Every dish I prepare is different. But today I discovered that everyone has no utensils at all." "How do you eat these steaks?" "You are reading www.uukanzu.com. You can't take a bite by yourself. But if you cut it and switch it, you don't have enough time." "What should you do now?" Ryan asked Nick after he said, "Isn't it said that ghosts can carry things from their lifetime?" "Yeah, but no one will bring utensils on his body before death. Not to mention that in my era, everyone cut the knife and ate it with their hands. The fork has not been popularized. In the older era, like in the era of Slytherin, there were no knives and forks." "You don't need to worry, I have a way." After finishing, Ryan pulled out a straw sword from the space bag, and smeared blood on the sword after biting the index finger. After Hermione saw the blood smeared, it seemed that there was a faint flash of light on the sword. But when she looked closely, she found that the sword did not seem to change. After Ryan held the stake with the hilt and cut into the soul state on the table, the stake's blade was divided into 2 sections. "How did you do it?" Hermione asked with wide eyes. "I just tried it, but I didn't expect it to be really effective. After all, the book only said that the Calamus sword can cut evil spirits. It is an oriental weapon to get rid of evil spirits." After listening to Ryan, Nick suddenly rushed over. Even though Ryan closed the sword quickly, The blade made a small nick in the back of Nick's hand. Watching Nick stare at the wound on the back of his hand in a daze, Ryan thought he was worried about his serious injury, so he quickly told him, "The Calamus sword to the ghost is the same as the ordinary sword to the human body. You are just about the same as our ordinary people. It will be fine in a few days. Don't worry too much." Unexpectedly, after listening to these words, Nick suddenly knelt on one knee and folded his hands together and said, "Mr. Liang, I have something to ask you. Please promise me." Chapter 100, At the Banquet of the Dead. After Nick knelt down, the air in the responsive room seemed strange, and Hermione covered her mouth in surprise. Ryan felt that Han Mao was standing upright at this time. After all, according to the Eastern saying, letting people older than their own grade kneel to themselves would have to lose their lives. How long should Nick's 500-year-old fold? Not to mention that this is a corrupt country, Nick's action is too much like courtship, and Hermione may have wanted to be crooked behind. In order to save his image, Ryan quickly said like Nick, "Sir, if you have any help for me, please say directly. Don't look like this. I can't bear such courtesy." Nick also seemed to be agitated just now, and now Ryan wakes up as soon as he says it. He stood up and said, "Sorry, I was scared by the excitement just now, but I really have something important that needs your help." After talking, Nick pulled his ears and broke his head off. Ryan heard Hermione's inhalation behind him, and he also felt a little uncomfortable in his stomach. At this time Nick said, "Look, I was cut 44 times with a blunt axe around my neck. I want it to be cleaner and cleaner than anyone would want. But it's a pity, because there is so little skin on it. I'm dying. They will be squeezed out afterwards. Are they suffering more from their heads than me?" Lane saw Nick's face brightened, and should be very angry. "They didn't suffer as much as I did, but because their heads moved completely and pushed me out." So speaking of which, Nick took a breath and calmed down. "Lane, I just saw what you caused in our ghost. The ability of the wound, so I want to ask you to help me cut off the rest of the skin." Ryan felt a little ill after hearing Nick's request. After all, cutting off a person's neck, even if it was just a ghost's neck, was a little too exciting for him. So he said to Nick, "Be aware that in the East, the complete separation of the head and body is a very auspicious symbol. In ancient times, even the beheading, the executioner tried to leave a little skin. So do you want to think about it?" "I've been thinking about it for almost 500 years, Nick said with a suppressed voice. "You don't have to worry about those things. After all, this is the UK, and the situation is different everywhere. You should help a friend for a small favor." Ryan looked back at Hermione in a panic, hoping to get a suggestion from her. Hermione was also frightened by this strange request, her hands twisted together in front of her chest, staring down at her shoes without knowing what to say. After being silent for a long time, Hermione finally raised her head and said, "I think the adjective almost headless is too bad for a ghost, and this humiliation Nick has endured for nearly 500 years. Ryan, if you can, he will help him as much as possible. After all, he is the ghost of our Gryffindor." Well, it seems that Hermione put forward a more powerful reason. Ryan thought about it after listening to it, and finally made up her mind. He raised his head and looked at Nick, who was staring at him with an uneasy eye, and said, "Well, I can help you, but you can't say this to the outside world." "Relax, I won't say anything outside, I swear in the name of Sir Poppington." Ryan nodded, and let Nick hold his head with both hands, struggling to lift it up, then took a deep breath, and said in his mouth that he was a dead man. Then raised the Calamus sword and waved hard at the spot where the flesh and flesh were connected. The flesh broke off, and Nick threw his head on the ceiling because his hands were too hard. Perhaps because Nick has just become completely headless, so Nick's body looks a little clumsy. It took him a lot of time to adjust and successfully put his head around his neck. But Ryan can see that Nick's mood is very good now, and the brightness of the whole spirit is much brighter than before. After dancing in the air for a while, Nick finally remembered Ryan. He floated to Ryan and said excitedly, "Thank you for helping me fulfill my wish for hundreds of years. I will remember your favor. You are my forever friend." After Ryan finished today's work and Hermione was ready to make a request room, Nick asked Ryan to help him keep this secret temporarily because he wanted to blockbuster at his banquet. On the way out of the request room to the library, Hermione asked Ryan curiously, "Is the ghost very different from us in many ways?" "At least I don't think normal humans will have that strange request. I read that most of the ghosts in my book are the same as they were before, but it does not rule out that some ghosts have their own obsessions after death." Obviously Nick's obsession is its neck, so he will only propose so strange request. Ryan replied with a shrug. The days passed quickly, and Halloween came. The auditorium was decorated with bats and carved pumpkin lanterns. Everyone is rumoring that Dumbledore invited the skeleton song and dance troupe to perform. I can't figure out why you go to that kind of cold and damp place. You know that the Halloween banquet has more food than usual. Lane and Hermione are preparing to go to the underground classroom in front of the auditorium. Ron, standing next to Harry, said to them both, "Just know that eating, you don't understand the beauty of gaining knowledge." Hermione responded, and then pulled Ryan into the underground classroom. On the way, Ryan took out the pre-painted rune paper and handed it to Hermione, Living people and undead are together for a long time is not good. With this you will not be affected. Is this the magical scripture of the Heavenly Dynasty? It looks completely different from our ancient magical scripture, Hermione said as he stuffed this rune paper into his clothes pocket. The corridor was lit with tiny black candles, and the light of Lan Yinying was on it. Ryan felt that Nick created an atmosphere closer to Halloween than in the auditorium. Every step in the underground classroom, they can feel that the temperature is a bit lower. Fortunately, the rune paper was also activated at this time, keeping this cold breath out of the body. The sound of nails drawing blackboards echoed in the corridor. Maybe this is the music of the dead. Arrived at the door of the classroom, they saw Nick dressed up and greeted the guests at the door. Welcome, my dear friend. Nick took off his hat and bowed. Please come in soon. Thank you for your help. I think this banquet will be the biggest banquet in the 300 years of Britain. The temperature in the basement is lower, and Ryan and Hermione can breathe out even with one mouth. In the temporary dance floor on the open space of the classroom, hundreds of ghosts huddled together waltzing. On the stage, a group of ghosts were making noise with a music saw. The blue light from 1,000 candles in the chandelier on the ceiling illuminated all this clearly. This is more like a Halloween in a real magical world than a banquet in the auditorium. Lane heard Hermione excitedly beside him.